Thank you, everyone, for joining our Breaking Down Racial Barriers Roundtable discussion. My name is Sam Rayner, and I am the Industry Development and Membership Coordinator for the Canadian Independent Music Association, CIMA. First of all, this series is on a national platform and on a national audience, and with deep respect, I would like to honor and acknowledge the land we are meeting on is traditional territory of many nations across Canada. Now, just to give you a bit of information about CIMA, we are a national trade association, and we are here to represent the interest of the Canadian independent industry. Our members consist of businesses from all across Canada, such as the independent record labels, managers, publishers, recording studios, and any others in the independent world. And we represent the industry in a handful of ways by advocating for the industry, creating exporting opportunities for, as well as hosting professional development sessions like these. And as a first step to a long road towards establishing an equitable and inclusive industry, this series has been designed for everyone. So businesses, artists, music industry associations like CIMA to listen to and learn from lived experiences of Black working professionals we work with every day. And BDRB is a CIMA project, but it's in joint partnership with Ian and Click, and they've worked tirelessly on programming and ensuring the format of these conversations address different intersections of identity. And we could not have done it without their direction and support. So a big thanks to you two, and a big thanks to our administrative coordinator, Matthew Baydu, for his assistance with the entire series. We would also like to acknowledge the funding support of the Government of Canada Factor in Ontario Creates. Besides that, we also have Advance supporting our 10-part series. And also every week we have episode partners to come and help promote, but to listen to. And for episode 10, we wanted to thank everyone for with all the 10-part all the other episodes like 1 to 9. So I'm going to list them right now. We have Alberta Music, we have Breakout West, Canadian Live Music Association, Canadian Music Week, Canadian Federation of Musicians, East Coast Music Associations, Guild of Music Supervisors, the Juno Awards, and Caris, Manitoba Music, Music Managers Forum, Canada National Campus Community Radio Association, the Music Video Production Project, a joint RBC Music and Prism Prize initiative, SOCAN, Unison, Benevolent Fund, and Working Culture. And we wanted to have more people, and we still want to have more people part of these conversations to listen and whatever we're going to be doing in the future. And now I will pass it to Click.
Hey, thank you so much, Sam. So we're at the finale now, and it's actually, kind of speaking with Ian today. It's actually pretty amazing what we've been able to do here. 60 different Black, music professionals coming together to speak about the challenges that we have faced and that we deal with, and how to conquer them and change them. And to get here was not, just something that happened overnight. I have to thank CIMA and Ian who helped me, work together on kind of bringing this whole concept together. So, and a big part of it is not just ending today. It's really what we're doing with this information that we've gathered, and how we're going to actually hold tasks to people on it. And a big part of that, I'm happy to have, people from that created Advance, that helped create Advance on the discussion today. So it's a big one for us to talk about a lot of the solutions and the call to action. I'm going to throw to Ian now.
I'm actually going to take a moment to throw to Stuart, the president of CIMA.
Sorry about that.
You guys forgot about me.
I heard my name, so I just jumped in. I'm sorry.
That was my bad. There's so much going on here, and then I just completely forgot. Anyway, sorry, Stuart.
Yeah, there's just so much going on. But as Sam said, with the list of all the supporters, it really does take a village here. And that's what we're counting on. And geez, I can't believe that we are at the end of the series already. It's been a hell of a journey. And I can tell you that the discussions over these past 10 weeks or 9 weeks for me has been nothing short of, just incredible and very impactful. And really, I think it's made all of us who's been listening to these discussions reflect on our own actions, and hopefully to commit to ourselves to, to do better. And I can tell you that CIMA as an organization is on board to be a voice for change. And I think we've rightly taken some criticism these past 10 weeks during these sessions, and obviously outside of these sessions. And I'm sure many of you have, rightly be of the opinion that you've heard all this before from people, and that, that we should and must do better. But I can tell you that, our board is taking these important issues very seriously and is making change, and that we are committed, to keep this dialogue going and to commit to action moving forward. We are truly honored to be part of this whole conversation. And we're going to keep saying this, but I sincerely want to thank and acknowledge the genuine leadership of both Ian and Click. I'm very impressed with these two gentlemen, and they are true heroes for the cause. And I can tell you that they are very inspiring to watch and to listen to. And I want to say thank you to all of the panelists participating today, and all of the panelists that have participated these past few weeks. As Click said, there were 61 panelists over these sessions over these past 10 weeks, and not including today, we've had over 1,700 Zoom attendees listening to these conversations, and another 21,000 views on Facebook Live. So that's truly outstanding and incredible. And those numbers don't include those who are watching today. And those numbers don't include those who have watched the recorded episodes from the BDRB or the CIMA websites too in between the sessions. It's just amazing. So thanks everyone. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion, and I'll have a few more words to say at the end too. So thanks very much. And Ian, it's over to you.
Thank you, Stuart. My name is Ian ESPINET, and I am the co-creator, co-curator, and moderator today for the 10th and final episode of Breaking Down Racial Barriers. This has been quite a journey. I can't tell you how incredible a journey it's been, and how many incredible Black professionals we have in our industry. Coming down to 60, myself and Click went through almost 500, I believe. It was absolutely crazy to get to where we are today. So if you haven't been on board, BDRB is a 10-part roundtable discussion on anti-Black racism, anti-Black, not BIPOC, not anything else, anti-Black racism in the Canadian music industry, which will culminate in a report which will be disseminated to CIMA's over 30 existing, but potentially more, peer and partner organizations in an attempt to make change at a systemic level. So Click, did you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, so one thing we definitely want to make note of and mention is just the fact that today is to emphasize is based on conclusions, and those conclusions are going to be around what we've been discussing the last 9 weeks, and then also with our esteemed guests and friends here, we'll discuss what the solutions are, what a potential call to action will be. This is not a report. Like what you're seeing right now is not the actual report. We're going to dig deeper into what we find today and in what we found in the past, and will be created along with the Black entertainment community and members of Advance and with CIMA. All right.
Perfect. So as I said, over the last 9 weeks, we've discussed anti-Black racism in all areas of the industry. We began by talking about the concept of systemic and systematic racism. Just an overview: in medicine, systemic means something that affects the whole body, or at least multiple organs. In the music industry, systemic racism is like cancer. It spreads throughout and it harms everything. In this case, the entire industry. So originally, biases, negative stereotypes, and prejudice were used to justify as reasons for the creation of policies and practices. Those policies and practices work to serve a particular group or a particular viewpoint or position in society. That's why we are here where we are today. So once in place, these systems reinforce negative stereotypes, and they're used as excuses why particular groups are not represented or left out. And those impacted by those systems are usually seen as the cause of their own issues and circumstances instead of attacking the real problem, which is the system. So now that we have an understanding of that, that's the starting point for BDRB for breaking down racial barriers. Over the next hour and a half, 2 hours, we'll summarize the issues tabled by our 54 guests from the last 9 weeks. And with the help of our guests today, we will work on breaking down systemic and systematic racism and the effects that it has on Black music professionals in the areas of media, including radio, television, print, and online, how it affects artists and creatives, events and live spaces, and finally the corporate infrastructure, including record labels, digital platforms, and industry associations, okay? The themes that have run through the last 9 weeks that have been most prevalent, number one theme, and something that's come up in every single episode, probably 90% of the time, is representation. The other prevalent themes have been access, access to education, information and resources, and economic challenge like finance. And then the third one was regulation. So whether it be governmental or organizations or corporations changing policies, okay? So everything that we look at today, we're gonna look at through those 3 lenses. And yeah, I'd like to start to introduce our esteemed panel of speakers for the final episode. MIRO. And everyone can unmute.
There you go. Hey everyone, thanks for coming in for this last episode. My name is MIRO Oballa. For those that don't know me, I'm an entertainment lawyer at Taylor Oballa Murray Leyland. I've been in the business for almost 2 decades now. We represent mostly on the talent side, but also labels and publishers across the Canadian music industry, and some Canadians that live in America as well. And throughout my years, I've kind of seen the music industry grow and evolve in some ways, and unfortunately stagnate, and in some cases decline in other ways that we'll be touching on today. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time and to be here. So.
Okay, Vivian.
Hey, again, thanks everyone for participating in the last 10 of these, well, 9 of these. This is the 10th. My name is VIVIAN BARCLAY. I'm the head cook and bottle washer at Warner Chappell, Canada, music publisher. Been around various, parts of this business from radio on down for too many years.
Let's go to Randy.
Hey, Al, how you doing? Thanks for having me. I'm the general manager for Vibe 105, which is Canada's longest operating broadcast for majority Black and Afro-Caribbean content. And I'm also the CEO for VX3 Exchange, which is a charitable agency that leverages the power of media to engage with communities through training and media solutions. And I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. Let's go to Jessica.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. Jessica YAMOAH. I'm the founder and CEO of INNOVATE, Inc. We provide awareness and access to underrepresented communities with a focus on innovation and technology.
Okay. And we have one more guest who will introduce himself when he is available. And Click, please introduce yourself.
My name is Click, David Cox. Been in the business for 2+ decades, from an artist to a promoter to a record label guy, now manager. And I'm happy that we're all here talking about this.
And our final guest is Okoshio. He is off screen. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. My name is Okoshio. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm sorry I shouldn't be driving and talking at the same time, but I'm trying to build a strong Black woman. I took my daughter to jiu-jitsu class tonight and I'm back on. I'm a business manager. I've been doing this for a while. Work on the record side, work with the artist, and I'm essentially the person people cry to when they need money. And I've seen, I started out in consulting, so I've been the only Black person, not only in the room, but in the building a lot. So I've seen things evolve and some things not evolve so much. Moving from consulting to music, I was thinking that there'd be way more Black representation, but it's not necessarily the case.
Okay. And as I said, I'm Ian Andre ESPINET. I am a 25-year music entrepreneur, owner of Black Star Graphic Design and Communications and Iconic Arts and Entertainment. club and concert company here in Toronto, Canada.
Don't
Okay,
forget
so
don't forget C.
We didn't bring
my
Big C.
goodness, and Mr. Big C, Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Big C MANNIX, almost 30-year music industry veteran. Currently hold the position of manager of A&R.
Perfect. Okay, so let's jump right in.
For Sony,
Sorry?
for Sony Music Canada, I did not. Yes. Anyway.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start at the core. A lot of our panelists have explained that at the core of this conversation on anti-Black racism in the Canadian music industry, that there is one central concept, and that central concept is the definition of our music. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the terms that are used for Black music: urban, which usually refers to hip hop and R&B, pop, which at this point is all music that are Black musics, such as hip hop and R&B, and then the terms like world music for Black music forms like reggae, soca, and Afrobeats. Does anybody want to speak to these terms and the idea that there's possibly a need for changing them?
I'll take a stab at that. I mean, Black music has always been defined from the beginning of the music industry. As a matter of fact, when the Black records started kind of differentiating themselves and selling at a different rate, they started what they called race record divisions. So Black music was referred to as race records in the beginning of the industry. So, I mean, we're talking the 20s, 30s, 40s. So the culture has always been defined within the industry. You know, of course, race records mean, you can't call them race records, but I mean, I think that, calling it what it is which is Black music, which is the overarching banner. And then underneath that Black music, which is I think the problem we've had over the years, which is we don't get the differentiation of our music that all the other musics get. Like there's all these forms of rock, there's all these forms of folk, there's all these forms of country, but especially in this country, it's rap or R&B. So, I mean, first we need to define the pillars underneath of the overarching banner of Black music, and go from there. You have reggae, you have soca, you have various forms of Black music that are their own genres and their own, tentpoles. So that's, to answer the question, I think it should just be Black music, and then you define what it is under Black music, just like anybody else.
Yeah, I agree with C. I've really always taken issue, frankly, with the term urban, just because I think it's a catch-all bucket that's just an easy way to allow for music that is in the style of various Black music styles, but not done by Black music. And, to have that be represented. It doesn't take away from the fact that they're doing Black music, even though they happen to not be Black. But at the end of the day, the music is still Black music. And then underneath that, you can define what it is. And those of us that are very specific about the kind of music we're talking about, we get agitated that people think people don't understand there's a difference between soca and calypso. We get aggravated when people don't understand the difference between reggae and dancehall. And so we agree to these catch-all phrases that then start to go up and up and up until we ended up with urban, because it's the polite way to say it. Me personally, I think it should just be Black music. And to Craig's point, then underneath that, there obviously are many different genres and iterations of Black music that we could be categorizing. But then to do that, we have to acknowledge that there are a lot of people, artists, songwriters, whoever, playing in the Black music world, and that's fine, but you're doing Black music. It's not tropical house. Like, what the fuck is tropical house? Excuse my French. But yeah, what is tropical house? Like, so to me, that's always been the bigger issue, is that there's a part of our business that has never wanted to acknowledge two things. it's easy to just call it urban. It's easier from a marketing perspective. And then that other piece is to have to acknowledge that there are people who are not Black that are doing Black music. And that's the thing that I think that people have been shying away from.
I would dovetail off of what Vivian said by just saying that Black music would allow for us to take ownership back of the music in a lot of sense, even though it would still be a catch-all of some form. It would at least provide us an opportunity to take back ownership of the music that we create and that is really driving the industry right now.
And to kind of all, everyone's point further to those points, a couple things. So definitely agree that, one of the areas where we suffer is a lack of, I don't know, I'm going to use the word respect. I don't know if the word respect is accurate, but a respect for Black music that allows it to be subdefined in the same ways that like C was saying with rock, right? So in rock, you'll have a bunch of different categories of rock, and you'll have alternative rock and classic rock and indie rock and folk rock and all this kind of stuff, but rap is just rap. So, whether you're doing trap or whether you're like doing, backpacker stuff or this, whatever, it's just like, oh, that's just all rap, right? So that's, to me, is problematic from it's like the music isn't worthy of having its own subcategories and subgenres, right? So that's one part of it. And the second part, to kind of flip that around on a broader level though, even if we're calling it Black music, I think it's still very important for us to make the push and the fight for this music being part of the greater tapestry of Canadian music, right? Because what's historically happened is there's a narrative of what is considered Canadian music, and Black music tends to live outside of that narrative, right? So, and that affects artists, that affects heritage artists, Black heritage artists, that affects, how Black artists who've had success in the industry, despite the challenges, how much recognition they get, and all these other factors. So I think, speaking from a Canadian perspective, while at the same time, I agree with what people are saying, Randy, what you're saying about, taking ownership of the music back. I think it's still important in relation to the larger narrative around Canadian music and the history of Canadian music and the value of Black music in Canadian music, that Black music starts to be seen by the industry and treated with that as part of that canon of music, right?
And I spoke to this a couple of times. I use the analogy all the time of Chinese food or Taste of the Danforth. We all eat Greek food, we all eat Chinese food, we all make it, and we all enjoy it, but we never take it away from its culture. And I think that one of the concerning issues with separating the music from the people is that, on top of the fact that we lose it culturally, we also lose the economic impact that it has when it's separated off and it's called pop music, when hip hop and R&B are Black music. And so when we're looking at the numbers that we actually create, those numbers are not necessarily attributed to us, and many times in the case of radio that we'll talk about later, we are good enough to develop and break the music, but not good enough to keep it. Where our stations are categorized certain ways, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess the question for me next would be, who are the decision makers and the gatekeepers to whom we speak with respect to this name change? Is it the government? Is it the industry, the labels, the DSPs, the chart people? Like who do we speak to, and what is it that we need to be done solution-wise?
One layer of ownership rests with the CRTC in terms of how they rank and categorize music. I think at this stage of the game, what we're asking for is for the CRTC to isolate or specifically target Black music as a category unto itself. We can get into the subgenres of the music, but CRTC would play a major role in terms of how the radio or media industry actually calculates music contributions. And then I throw it to Vivian in terms of how the industry could get involved from a label and music makers standpoint.
I'll comment on, Craig, you as well. I think you know, unfortunately for us here in Canada, or fortunately, I don't know which way you look at it. I mean, we're still very influenced by what happens with our neighbors to the south and what trends they pick up on this topic. And, you know, my last boss at Warner Chappell, Big John, John Platt, you know, he was very vocal about wanting the industry to stop referring to Black music as urban, and did a whole piece on that. And then what you've started to see is some of the American labels, you know, even before this space that we're in right now, doing things like hiring head of Black music, like calling it what it is. And I think that as you start to see that happen more, especially, you know, in the States, you know, it shouldn't be that everything trends off of the States, but the reality is it does. We can't ignore that in a way. I mean, I'd love Canada to take the lead on this and just, you know, make the changes. And I have seen incremental changes at some of the labels with some of the wording, etc. And so, yeah, look, if all the label heads here in Canada want to just, you know, call it what it is and make a move on that, I think you'd be seen as very forward thinking, and it will actually look really good to do that. I think it's the right thing to do, and then work down from there. But I think that you are starting to see little incremental things, as I said, with people being named head of Black music at certain labels in the States. And I think that will start to trickle down. I think it's a matter of, we've spent so much time building up urban that we now have to sort of undo a little bit of that to come back down the other way and go, okay, well, where do we put this? But the reality of the situation is, as we've gotten into digital, we've become more and more fragmented in regards to what we call things. Just all you have to do is go look at any DSP and their playlists and how micro broken down things are. We haven't gotten better in moving it up this way. We've gotten, like, if we thought it was fragmented before, it's 50 million times more fragmented. You know, if you were looking at hip hop, there's 50 million different playlists for every possible thing that you might need to satisfy within the world of just hip hop. So we're not going in the right direction where that part's concerned. And I don't really know if you can put that genie back in the bottle, say, from a perspective of the DSPs and how they do that. But it would be great if, as at the start of all of that, they did acknowledge, look, this is all Black music. And if we want to break down hip hop into 50 different things, you know, that's a marketing thing. And I think that's the difference. So, I mean, I don't know, Craig, what you feel about that.
You know, personally speaking, I truly feel that getting the Black music banner is important, because that's kind of like the cornerstone to then you can build an industry from that, right? So from that you have, okay, we're reclaiming Black music.
I felt like we had that at one point with you guys.
We did have that. We had that at almost all of the majors had it. Even some of the independents had independent contractors. Like, it was a thing, you know, in the 90s, you know, from about 95 to 2000, it was a thing. There's an infrastructure, and you know, there's a few people that are still around because of that infrastructure, you know, like myself and Kevin Ice White and Kerry, you know, there's a few of us. There's a handful of us. Kerry Riley. I mean, there's a handful of us.
And there's a bunch that are work on the outside, like myself.
And then, like yourself. I'm not just thinking from a major perspective. So from that, you know, and that's how you create infrastructure. And now with the changes that are happening and the inroads that are happening, like there's, you know, there's all the different agencies and stuff are being talked, you know, there's communication there. So now it's time to rebuild that infrastructure, because we need to have people in place in all of those areas and facets and growing with the industry. And that's where you'll have areas for advancement and you know, people will look and be like, oh, I can actually become that, or I can, you know, and that's how we'll start populating things And that's how you create an overall industry, which will then spill out to
empowering the word.
Empowering the word. I mean, let's face it, guys. I mean, I've been thinking about this forever, and it's like Drake, The Weeknd, Tory Lanez, Jacoy, like the list goes on. None of those artists considered Canadian companies because, let's face it, we weren't ready. We were not ready for them. We were not set up. They could not walk into our buildings and see an infrastructure where it's like, oh, there's someone at radio who talks the talk and walks the walk. There's an A&R people that you know, that I can identify with. You know, oh, the marketing person's dope, like blah 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 blah. You know, the streaming person. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have any of those areas. You know what I mean? Now hopefully there'll be need for promo people as well. So you know, if we have all those things set up, you know, these things wouldn't have slipped through our hands. These things, they could have been Canadian signed. They could have been Canadian artists.
But to add to what, sorry, to build on what you're saying, Craig, I think part of the challenge is even beyond having you guys in the places, is you guys having the autonomy. There were a number of you, like you said, within that space that had certain positions, but would you have had the autonomy and would you have had the resources in terms of having the capital to sign the Drakes or sign, you know, Cardinal and be able to take him mainstream, or, you know, some of the Michimies, all of those types of artists. And I think what we've seen over time is the whole appropriation piece or subculture being absorbed by mainstream culture isn't new. Whether it's punk rock absorbing reggae and ska and whatnot and taking it mainstream and then being able to capitalize it, like that's been part of what's been needed to legitimize, to Vivian's point earlier, legitimize Black, urban, whatever it is. But now we're in a position with the state of the world, and unfortunately with the murder of George Floyd, not even the passing, but the murder, to be able to not just reclaim some of those things, but have these structures and the systems themselves take accountability. So some of those solutions are, like you said, creating a pipeline where it's not just in the music industry, but, you know, having worked in tech and in the tech space, I mean, Craig and I, we've talked about this all the time. Why aren't some of you guys transitioning and evolving into roles at Apple, at Google, at Microsoft Play? Because you guys are the titans, you have that experience. Furthermore, you have that intersection of not just technology, but you also bring that bench strength of being industry moguls. So you understand the evolution and you can speak to that, but then you can also help recreate the structure in terms of building the pipeline, right? Because you bring in someone, and not to say age, not to be ageist or anything, but if you have that bench strength of someone like a Vivian, you, Carrie, Ice, any of you guys, Click, Ian, being able to mentor and build those people along the way, then you're setting them up to win. If you're not giving them that exposure, giving them that history, because that's the other piece, we're just replicating the same process. And just one other quick point, as much as we follow the US, we're in a very unique position as Canadians because we are smaller, we are agile. We currently have a federal government that is open and receptive. We're currently in the decade for people of African descent. So it's we have 4 more years, it ends 2024. So we have an opportunity in terms of how we want to restructure our music, how we want to go about things in terms of solutions, to be industry leaders in the sense that in tech, Canada is a major player. Why can't we be that in music, especially seeing what we've produced, whether it's Drake, whether it's Bieber, whether it's some of the other people coming out. I mean, right now there's a Deborah Cox challenge on Instagram, right? She's Canadian. So if we want to make that move, I feel like we have approximately 4 years.
Well, we definitely are in control of the music from the artist side. That's undeniable.
But the renaming, like you said.
Yeah, the renaming, but also having that exact, you know, we don't have the parallels that we have on the music artist side in Canada, from all those artists you've named and more, from dominating Black music and pop music. Mm-hmm. Canadians, we punch way above our weight, speaking of what you're talking about from a population perspective. But what we don't have on the business side of this is that correlation to the power that we have on the artist side. And that is basically where we find ourselves and how we got to this point, especially even with Advance, is that, to your point about the decade of African descent, which I didn't even know was a thing. So thank you very much for, enlightening me. Yeah. How do we only have like a couple years left of this? And, we haven't gotten to certain places in certain industries. So I think that we definitely are at the forefront of music, but from one lens only. And I think that's something that's happened in the music business, not just in Canada, all over the world, where we've definitely always had a focus on artists. It's always been very artist focused, and then by add on very label focused. And what we forget about sometimes, and it's kind of like, I don't know why, but it is what it is, like My World, publishing, or, Clicks World in management, or whatever the case may be. All these other things that actually make the engine run and are there to be supportive and bring artists to the forefront. We just kind of go, okay. And that doesn't make any sense for where we are and the money and the economic powerhouse that Canada is on the artist side. It just doesn't even compute at all. Like,
isn't that based on exposure and awareness? So for example, if a young person coming up, they see the artist, they don't see the manager, they don't see the business people, they don't see the people who work at iTunes, they don't see all of those people. So it's a bit of that, people feel like they can't see what they can't be. If
totally.
There's events like, for example, Innovate Inc., we host young people. So in December, we hosted grade 7-8s from Juilliard School at Google and Nike. So we took them to the office. They dressed up in their Sunday best. They walked through the path. They got to speak to someone who was who got in through internship at Google, someone who got in through internship at Nike, but they got to actually see. And as they walked through the office, oh, this is the accounting department. This is this department. So now it's like a conversation, a dialogue starts in their head, because doing it at university or post-secondary or college isn't the time. You need to get in their head, exactly, grade 7-8 earlier, so that they actually see it. So it's, just like basketball or any other sport, there's gonna be 1% that make it, but what is everyone else going to do? We did the same thing at ESPN, show them behind the scenes, producers, all of those things, because they don't know. I mean, most of us are first, second generation Canadians, so our exposure is very limited. Most parents want you to be doctor, teacher, lawyer, engineer. It's only getting into those roles. You understand, when I started at Nike, I didn't know there was someone whose technical job was to teach you on the elements of footwear, or there's a job where someone actually gets to pick the shoes that come into the country. You only get that exposure once you're in the inside. So it's about, I think, doing more awareness in terms of CIMA and all the other structural pieces that are in place, in terms of doing campaigns that talk about the industry titans, like everyone on this panel, the different elements, like the fact that I wanted to be a lawyer. Did I know I could be an entertainment lawyer?
That's
after the fact.
That's actually something that I know Advance has talked about doing. And I know that is definitely something that we'll get more into. I know we have a lot of areas to cover. And I just wanted to say one quick thing about the idea of implementing the word Black music. One thing that somebody said in the Facebook right now was, by going and using the word Black music, will that limit us for people spending, like advertisers spending their money in that space, which was always actually an issue of why the word urban was brought back in, because of that exact fact. And I think the question is not so much that, but also, when is the right time to actually implement that? Is it right at the beginning, or is it after having more representation within advertising spaces by us? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I would jump in on that to say you're right that it's a multi-pronged approach that we have to take, but at the same time, it's a language play first, in terms of just taking that ownership back. If they see it as Black music, it'll dictate that you need to have Black voices and Black faces that manage and curate that content. And that's what's missing right now, is that we've given up a lot of rights and ownership when we say it's pop, or that it's this, or that it's alternative. Every time we give it another word that other people can own, it takes away from opportunities where we can assert ourselves. So although there's multiple tranches that need to take place, it first starts with that language play. Let's just take it back. And then let's not even worry about all of the stigmas and all of the systemics that are the reasons why we had to code it, right? Let's just take it back, and then we can start to apply other solutions in line with potentially our allies and within the industry, so that we can hit on what C said, start building up some infrastructure that is that's structured around propping up and presenting Black media.
So, sorry, were you about to speak, Steve?
I'm done, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to the Click's comment earlier. I mean, the advertising portion, I mean, that was kind of done in the US in the radio market, right? That was a US move. But in Canada, we never really had Black radio. And even then, so when we did have when we had a little bit of it, it was called urban. And that advertising excuse was still used in this country. So, I mean, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, what do you call it? Like, you know, when the radio puller was saying, "Our advertisers, they don't want to," I'm just like, "All right, okay, well, you know," and you know, we've never called it Black music in Canada.
Let's take it back. That's
yeah. It's like I think that the problem with not calling it Black music, and what I've seen in other, you know, genres like Afrobeats where they call it world music, is that we're othered, right? The default is a European folk, contemporary folk based music, and we are the alternative. We're the other, and because we're othered, we are seen as less, and that is part and parcel of what has gone on to underdevelop our infrastructure in the industry. And so I want to take a second to jump from there. Before we go there quickly though, solutions. You know, Jessica, are there any you know, impact studies or economic statistics or audits that we can do that can assist in showing the power of Black music, not Black music, it is Black music.
Well, I'd say Black music and even just the entertainment industry at large, including the promotions, the events, the parties, the carabanas, everything in between. It's about attributing value. That's what the language everyone speaks, whether it's from a corporate perspective, from a government perspective, et cetera. So you guys are definitely taking the right steps in terms of creating a report that, I guess I would use Apple lingo in terms of an ecosystem where you're not just looking at one piece, you'd be looking at the entire framework and ecosystem to say, this is where we add value, but also hold accountability to everyone in the chain. So that way, when people are wondering, or, you know, there's the debate about whether or not to call it Black music. Our Canadian government just dedicated or earmarked $221 million to Black entrepreneurs. And it wasn't a, you know, Afro-Canadian, it was Black. So I think in terms of timing and what's happening right now, we have I would say a small window in terms of being able to attribute value to the Black community and the diversity that comes within the Black community and the different elements, and being able to, within a report, whether it's conducting assessments within the industry to say, okay, let's look at the industry, how many senior level C-suite, similar to what the Black North Initiative is doing, same type of thing. Let's look at C-suite, let's look at leadership, because that's where it starts. If you don't have anyone, and I don't remember who said it earlier, in the space who can speak to the culture and why this is valuable or why this is important, you're already missing the boat. The amount of the power of Carabana, it's a case study that I've done where Carabana is younger than the Toronto International Film Festival. It goes without saying the value and power that the Toronto Film Festival has and the respect versus the value, power, and respect that Carabana has. Yet if you go to Trinidad and you look at Carnival, the entire island lives off Carnival from that 1 week. So why aren't we able to generate the value that is brought to the city, to the province, to the country from the community? So doing a report, doing the studies, but also holding everyone accountable. And I think because the government is now putting a focus and emphasis on it, this is the time to be able to push back, but not just within our community or not just within the people on this panel, but like I said, the CIMAs, even the tech providers in terms of the Apples, the Googles, et cetera, who are in those spaces, and start building that pipeline, but also making sure that it's from a collective impact approach where we're not just going to start with someone coming out of school or someone young who's passionate. It's like a mentorship or a sponsor program where you have the Vivians, the C's, the you guys working with these guys to make sure that the proper value is attributed, that they're set up, and that the spaces are inclusive so our community can win.
Perfect. So I want to jump to one of the dominant themes that has permeated this speaker series, and that is representation. why we are talking about systemics, and I want to get to the solutions every single time, is that these things are in every aspect, whether it's media, whether it's record labels, corporations, boards of directors, et cetera, et cetera. So panelists have spoken about the impact of the lack of representation on the creation and development of a Black infrastructure in Canada. So what needs to be done in terms, like, you know, every single person on this call, MIRO, how many Black entertainment lawyers do you know?
2 outside of myself.
Oko, how many Black business managers do you know?
None.
Vivian Barclay, how many general managers of major music corporations do you know?
Well, there's just me, but
Thank you. Craig, you know what I mean? We could go on, we could do this like for the whole panel, right? So there's been a call for Black leaders in organizations, but there's also been a call for Black people in all areas of the industry pipeline, on boards of governance, on the jurors, in the judging panels, in the funding organizations, everywhere. What needs to be done? What are we, what is our call to action, and what is it that we want to see these corporations and organizations do?
well, I think you also have to have the middle, and the middle has fallen out, and that goes back to what Craig was talking about. Back when we had Black music teams, there was a pipeline to get you from, I am on a street team, I'm the promo person, I'm an intern, I'm a coordinator. There's a way to get from point A to point B. Right now, we don't have that way to get from point A to point B. And it doesn't matter if you're at a major or outside, because I think there are people that are the equivalent of me running other things. And doing other independent companies or what are called independent companies, and doing bank, they're doing business. But what's not happening in the traditional part of the music business is no one's looking at those people out. So first of all, we bring people in, they come in as coordinators or assistants or whatever, and there's no pipeline, or they don't make it appealing to stick around long enough to get to the next place. So that middle piece where you would make the leap from one place to the next doesn't happen. Even if you look at my experience, I started and was the PD at CKLN, and arguably one of the only places Black music, you know, along with, you know, the CHRYs, the CIUTs, now Vibes of the World, were playing Black music. When I left and went into music publishing, which was not a parallel, which was not like equal for me, I literally took a massive step back. I left from being PD or managerial to going to be a coordinator. And it took years of me drilling it into people's heads, because that's what they see you as. And yeah, I should have been able to make a lateral move and come in at a title that was you know, representative of what I was doing out in another part of the business. And that's what we're not doing well. There are people out there that are in accounting, like you said, in legal, in other places that could be laterally moved into our business, into managerial spaces, that would then have an opportunity to move up this ladder in a faster way, because it's an odd thing to go from coordinator to GM. That's rare. It only happened because I wasn't a coordinator when I got there. And so I just created this space for myself, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. And I have to say that, you know, I don't know what's happening at some of the other spaces. I can only give a look in on what's happening now on the Warner label side, because I live with them. So, you know, in the last recent, you know, and I mean super recent, like last couple months, we've had some new people come in the building, and I'm pleased to say that they came in with the title of manager. And I think that's important. It's important that when you're bringing people in certain spaces, they come in at a level that makes sense so that they have a chance to move. They came in with the title manager, they have offices, they have responsibility, they have budgets, because that's what makes the difference. And so if we're going to close that gap, I think all factors of our business, not just the majors, not just the bigger companies, whether it's the DSPs, everybody needs to create a runway to, and I say this, I've said this so many times, if you want to see another me, you got to let people in. And by let people in, I don't mean just as the intern or just as the coordinator. You got to figure out how do you transition. If you see an executive out there in the world doing their thing, and you go, you know what, that's the skill set I'm missing, and it doesn't seem to exist in any of the other, you know, established music companies, go get them and bring them in and figure out how to bring their skill sets to what it is you need at the place that you're at. And I think that's not what we've been doing. We haven't been doing a really good job of that. And I'm hoping we start to do a better job, especially during these times where a lot of people are losing their jobs. Somebody said this last week, a lot of people are losing their jobs, and there are people out of work, but have amazing skills and they can transfer them to what we're doing. Like, I know we think really highly of ourselves, but this isn't rocket science. I'm not building rockets over here. So it's not, it's like, we shouldn't be afraid to get people from other places and bring them into the middle. We need to bring people into the middle.
I think what you said is true. I think the main thing, I came from consulting. The biggest shock to me was money. The amount of, the little money that people make in the music business.
That must be very shocking for you, because
it was absolutely ridiculous. To the point where I told the company that hired me not to pay me, because it was I didn't want to have the commitment on one side and not have the paycheck, so I just decided to start that way. But all that to say that I think the most interesting thing for me, and that's missing, I believe, in our industry, is the education that people don't understand, especially Black people in general, that you can be something other than an artist. It's almost the same thing that's happening in sports. Me as a business manager, MIRO as a lawyer, and our side, not with all due respect to A&Rs in this world and marketing people, there are a lot more Black marketing and A&R people because it's an easier path. But there's a lack in education, I find, at least on the accounting side and on the finance side, to show people what you can actually do. If you know math and you like money and you like to count and you like to understand things, there are a bunch of different ways that you can actually be in this industry and not only impact the labels, but also impact the artists, where you actually see the life difference that you make in their life, day-to-day life, between paying their rent and small, stupid things, people being in decent deals, where they own their masters and they own their publishing, all the things that Kanye is talking about right now. All that starts with education. The one thing that we don't have also, I find, is mentorship. One thing that I did when I came in, as I said, I didn't know anybody else in my position. I didn't know who to talk to in terms of how do you do this? So you just learn on the job.
Well, sorry, don't finish.
Hard to hear you, Randy. Say it again.
I cut myself off. I was going to say that I know Ian's going to get us there, but at the same time, what everybody's hinting around is the fact that we're missing a lot of economic infrastructure. One of the reasons why there isn't a middle ground in our pipeline is because a lot of people are discouraged to stay in jobs where they're underpaid. And there's a big difference between worth and value, right? I think all of us are worth a higher salary degree, and I don't think we're doing any type of rocket science. And my job is to find the next me and mentor them up. But during that trek of coming from, junior staff to coordinator to manager to whatever, there's a lack of resources available to us because the industry is blocking us out. Where there's value in Black music and Black content, there isn't enough money being invested in that tranche for us to pay the people.
Oh, totally. I had an interview last year with a major tech DSP type company, right. And the recruiter, I almost literally had to burst out laughing because she was like, "Oh, we won't be able to pay you X number." I almost pissed my pants because she actually thought that that's what I should be making at my position. And I almost died laughing because I was like, yeah, sure, you can't pay me X. I was like, this is a joke, right? But what to your point is that, like, to Oko's point, like what we make in the music business compared to what other industries make, you really gotta like music to want to stay over here. But the money, let me tell you, the money is there. I'm not saying the money isn't there. I'm not saying the money isn't there, but I'm just saying, like, in general, compared to these other places, and now they're intersecting. So if there's any time where the value needs to come up, it's now, because the tech companies are now the music companies, and you can't potentially have this group of people over here using and monetizing our music, and and this goes for all facets of the music business, and they're paying this, and then the people who are over here and supposed to like grind it out, find the music, nurture artists, do this and the other, get you to market, blah blah blah, we're making this. And that goes across many lines. That's not even just Black.
That's not a racial. That's just a music business issue.
Exactly.
I mean, I think just to kind of jump on what some of the other people are saying, to me, it looks like there's two things in terms of getting people. I think the goal is ultimately, when we talk about representation, it's representation in positions of decision making, right? You know, what we're not talking about is we want 200 people at low level. I mean, things got to start. People have to move through a pipeline. But ultimately, in order for this to be effective and for change to happen and fix some of the systemic issues, you need to have people in positions of decision making, right? And some of that is on the companies and that side of things, you know, where I think, to Vivian's point, I don't know what's going on at Warner, but from what you said, I'm heartened to hear that that's what people are doing, right? The commitment that I would ask of companies is, when you hire people and give them the tools they need to succeed. Hire people with the view, you're not just hiring Black people because there's a quota, and so you can put out a press release and be like, we moved from 7 to 17 people, look at us, right? But hire people because these are people you want eventually to be making decisions in your company, and therefore you're going to give them tools to succeed, right? You're going to work with them. You're going to find people who have potential, and you're going to work with them and give them tools to succeed. Because like Viv says, it's not rocket science. And you know, you look at the success of Black executives in America, and it's clear that it's doable. Like, it's one of the reasons it's not happening here is a lot of the systemic issues that have existed. And
sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that we need to do, the people here, the people who've been in the business for a while, you know, myself, Viv, Click, Ian, C, Oko, you know, Jessica, I'm not sure if you're in the music business, so you're kind of music adjacent.
Yeah, music adjacent, there you go.
But, you know, all that to take the time and try and identify those people that can follow in our footsteps and take the time to teach them, right? Because I mean, I got to say, like, one of the biggest imperatives for me around deciding, okay, well, look, let's start advanced, let's do something, was doing this for, you know, 18, 19 years and looking around being like, there's nobody behind me. And that's scary, right? And that's a problem, right?
So,
and that is the thing.
There's two things I want to touch on really quickly. One, the difference between Canada and the US is I have friends, counterparts who have left and gone to the US. The difference is over there, they have their network. So if a position comes up, I get job postings like, hey, you know, are you interested in this, before it hits the airwaves, to say, okay, we want to make sure one of our people are in. So let's do everything we can to support MIRO. Let's do everything we can to support Ian. Let's do everything we can to support Click. So they're working together. So it's that cohesiveness. But the other piece is, because they have that network, they're able to influence people. Whereas here, I find that there has been some of that intersection of music industry and innovation and technology, where the head of iTunes Canada, I can't remember, Craig would have to correct me. I don't know if she came from Universal or she came from Sony, but she was a music industry person who was able to make the transition. The difference is, because I'd say dominant culture, they're familiar with their peers. So when it comes time for those positions, they are transitioning their circle, their networks into these roles. So that's where we need to, as a community, do a better job of working together. Because if Miro gets the job, I'm part of his network. So if he needs someone to give him insights on diversity, inclusion, and thought leadership, Miro is going to call me. If I'm going to promote or host an event, I'm going to call Ian. If I need someone who's going to come in as a Titan, I'll call Vivian or Craig. Like, working with that strategic mindset versus I'm the only person in this position and I'm not worried about anyone else. And then, like I said, it's all network. So over there again, and not everybody, but for the most part, those guys are tight. They work as a unit and they bring in their own. So doing that here as well. And then from a dominant culture standpoint and the gatekeepers, making sure that, to your point, they are doing the work and making the inroads to form relationships. Because when the position comes open, we all know 9 times out of 10, they already know who they're putting in that position. We need to be in their heads and have that mind share, so that when the position comes up, we're already in their thought process. We're not like, oh, an afterthought, we need some Black people to put in the mix so we can look like we're inclusive. Like, that needs to be a no-brainer. It's like, yes, we're hiring Vivian, or no-brainer, we're hiring Oko. And that's kind of where we need to put some of the inroads in.
So I want to recenter this on, you know, like everybody on this call is autonomous in terms of their abilities, and, you know, like they, you know, we have some of the upper echelon of the industry on the call. However, the majority aren't. You guys represent probably the 1%. So in solution-based thinking, how do we direct this conversation and influence our allies? And I use the word allies very loosely, because if you've been watching, I've said, you don't call yourself ally, we'll tell you when you're an ally. But how do we get the powers that be that are watching, that are paying attention right now, how do we direct and influence them to nurture these opportunities? We talked about succession, we talked about retention in 8 and 9. You know, like, what is it that we want to see done in these companies, on these boards? You know, like for me, diversity just leads to better decision making. Sometimes it's an economic thing. What is it that we want to see done, solution wise?
For me, I kind of do my thing by just straight up action. Obviously, I'm part of Advance, and I'm going to support. Anybody that knows me knows I probably have one of the most successful internship programs personally. If you work for me, you usually get a job. You know, and I'm pretty serious about that part. But what I do, to be honest, is I just stay in people's ear. I'm on the Jessica plan. I literally go into people and have conversations and go, yo, like, if there's this one gig that it's obvious that a Black person should be in, can we please make sure there's a Black person in there? Like, I personally do that. And yeah, I realize I'm putting myself on the line sometimes, because I'm probably seen now as a little bit of a nag on this topic. And maybe right now it's okay that I'm a nag on this topic, because then it helps them kind of center themselves. But I think the other thing that you have to do is, like, and I said this to you guys, I said this to you, Click, and to Ian, when you guys started doing this thing and you started calling around, you asked some of us to be in really early. And I told you right off the bat, like, leave me out of this. There are enough people at Advance that are coming up behind me that have things to say, are knowing what they're talking about, that you can put on these panels. I'm not the only Black woman over here that can speak. And, you know, I don't need to be a part of this. I'm a part of this specifically because you asked me to be a part of the end of it. But I really, you know, over the last little while, if it makes sense for me to be there and I'm the person that needs to be there, sure, I'll show up. I have no problem with that. I hosted a panel earlier today, but I've been big on saying, look, Carrie's over at Sony. She's great on this topic. She knows what she's talking about. Here is her number. And I think we all, those of us that are up here, all have to make that just a general part of our workflow to do that, and ask everybody else in that space that has the ability to pass it on, because until people are seen in those worlds, they're not necessarily seen as a potential board member. They're not seen as a potential committee member. They're not seen as these kind of things. So, like, I'm really encouraged that Nicole is now, you know, she was put forth by Anthem Publishing, even though she's not at the top of Anthem Publishing, to be a part of the Music Publisher Canada board. So now I have another Black woman on a board that I can say, without it, you know, she will very soon be brought up to speed on board, you know, politics and how to function on a board. And so when somebody else calls and goes, oh, I need somebody else, I can immediately say, call Nicole, and depending on her bandwidth, she may be able to do it. And so this program that I hope comes to fruition as part of Advance, where we try to bring people up to speed on skill sets like being on a board, finances, all of these things, so that we can just actively put people in spaces other than ourselves, I think is super important.
So all of these conversations are surrounding Black people in spaces, hiring other Black people. You, Vivian, work at Warner Chappell. What is it that we want the remaining labels, the remaining boards? Because, you know, if you look around the industry, there are often, and it's only in the last couple of months, there are many, many boards that only have one Black person or no Black people at all until George Floyd. So what is it that we want solution-wise? Is it launching company initiatives? Is it detailing, like, is it going to recruiting firms to look for Black people? Is it hiring and nurturing? Like, what is it that we want solution-based?
I think it's all of those things, but at the end of the day, the reality is you may very well, as an organization or a company, be looking for someone in the space, and you may not find the perfect person that fits exactly into your slot. But what I would like companies and organizations to do is to commit to the fact that they want to be diverse. Specifically here, we're talking about Black people, and then find the appropriate person. We're not saying this is not, you know, let's just toss people a bone because they're Black. Again, don't hire people just to say you hired Black people. That's stupid. But hire the right people or bring people into organizations and then give them the tools, train them so that they are successful. So we're not 6 months down the road and you going, oh, that experiment didn't work. Like, because that's very easy to do. And I can see that coming. I can see that coming. And look, I own my 2 boxes. People go, well, you tick 2 boxes. Yeah, I'm well aware I tick 2 boxes, and that sometimes people are calling me because I tick 2 boxes. I'm a woman and I'm Black. It's easy to fill your quota if you call me or some other Black woman to be on your board. Makes sense. And sometimes, you know, there's been times in the past where I've said, you know what, I don't want to do it. I'm over, like, I cannot be on every board, right? But there's times where I do it so that I have the voice at the table, so that I can then say, okay, when I'm out, who are you replacing me with? Sometimes you do have to, like, fall on the sword and take one for the team, and then you can pass it on. And what pisses me off is when they ask me, I say no, and then I tell them this and they go fill it with a white guy. It's like, for the love of God, like, the reason why I'm passing on this is so you don't fill it with a white guy.
So many times the option to having, you know, like to what looks as tokenism or like quotas or whatever is when we ask, like when you say, you know, you take the position so it doesn't get filled with somebody else, somebody says, well, we don't want to like tokenize them. So the option becomes, don't fill it with anybody, just fill it with nobody. And that's what's been the problem in the Canadian industry for a long time. There's just like no representation. So, you know, let's move into the media space for a bit.
Before you move to,
sorry, go ahead,
that space, I still think that we've covered some great spaces in regards to representation and talking about mentorship, talking about internship, talking about that. But I still would love to hear what it means in terms of an action point or call to action to people that are not us, that are reaching and pulling people up. What about the companies, especially like, you know, the companies where we do not exist? There are areas in the music business right now where we do not exist. And I think there's a call to action that needs to be put in place. What is that?
So hire Black people to work Black music. So period. That's what I say to people. You ask me, I literally call up the agents. I go, you don't have one Black agent and you supposedly represent Black artists. For the love of God, hire one Black music expert, aka a Black person of the culture, from the culture, to represent that music. Like, it's as simple as that.
But even more so than just Black music, why can't our people work on everything?
Exactly.
Not dominant culture works on our stuff all the time, and you don't see us.
100.
And I think, just really quickly before Oko jumps in, sorry about that. In terms of action items, it's very straightforward. There's a few search and recruitment firms that are popping up now. They're specializing in BIPOC search. There's an entertainment entity that just focused to do the same thing. I don't know who's running it, so can't speak to that. But from a recruitment standpoint, working with these search firms, and I think a lot of times, as us all being people who are probably one within our organizations or positions, organizations need to start listening and talking to the people within their organizations. When you're the only Black person, all they need to do, and to your point, not in a tokenizing way, but have a legit conversation. And in all fairness, they might turn around and tell you, listen, I'm not the diversity and inclusion representative. You've hired them, go and speak to them. But in a way of not tokenizing people, pay for their consulting. I'm pretty sure all of you would appreciate an extra check. I'm sure, I mean, COVID, you can't really do much, but in terms of extra check, paying and valuing your expertise, paying and valuing what you bring to the table, that changes the conversation. It's not tokenizing when you can even just say, you know what, we understand or respect the fact your consulting would cost this much, but we can offer you this much, or whatever the case may be, and really putting a value on what we're bringing to the table. And that way, at least whether it's doing it through a recruitment firm, because those aren't cheap. So when you see an organization spending that kind of money, you see it. But if you work within, you get the facts. I mean, in all fairness, they might not be as open because they do have something at risk, but there's a number of different solutions, whether it's recruitment firms, whether it's speaking to the people within your organization, reaching out to industry partners that are across, like in North America, so in the States, or even worldwide, because there's a lot of solutions out there. So sorry, go ahead, Oko.
was gonna say that you're starting to see the Black people working on Black music more and more on the artist side. I've been seeing on my end, a lot of the artists that I work with now are really promoting within their team, either having a Black agent, a Black lawyer, a Black business manager, a Black publishing company. The record company is the only side that you can't go without. It's hard to find an all Black record company. But coming back to what we were saying before, I think the most important thing if we want to advance and being the one-on-ones in different situations, if we're all different points in different sectors in the industry, but we all talk to each other and we're all connected and we build a strong enough network, people will not be able to go around. It comes back to how do I get jobs and how do I get called on things, is because somebody talks to somebody else who talks to somebody else who then finds out, oh, call him, he's good. I'm in Montreal, of all places, French speaking. Most of my clients are Anglophone and most of my clients are not Canadian. Most of my clients are American or European, and I'd say 80% of them are Black. But if we build a strong enough network, I think that the white executive that you have on all the different companies, whether it's publishing or recording or on the legal side or on the accounting side, will have no choice. But if they want to talk to or find the best in the legal field who happens to be Black, they'll call within their network and get to MIRO at some point. And so on the publishing side. And that I think is the most important part, and also the mentorship. Bringing on people as we go and as we advance, we have to take it upon ourselves, each and every one of us, to mentor all these young kids. There's a bunch of 18-year-olds. I see a lot of 20-year-olds, a lot of 25-year-olds who are coming in. Most of the time, they don't know what they're talking about, and it's actually quite painful. And just educating them, showing them what they can do, and sending them to all the different people in the sector. You want to be an A&R? Talk to this guy. He'll give you a few minutes. He'll teach you. He'll guide you towards the right direction. You want to be in the business management? Talk to this guy. You want to be a lawyer? Talk to this guy. But bring people on so that strength in numbers. At some point in time, there will be no choice.
Right.
As much as in terms of numbers, we were talking about numbers before, Black music dominates the charts. Black music dominates touring. Black music dominates publishing. There is no reason why we as a people should not be in some of these executive positions at a much higher level than a young Diddy who grows from being an intern to becoming who he is just because he's bigger than life.
And you're echoing everything that these are all things that have come up in the last roundtables. I think that to end and to go to Ian, I would just say that I think that the big thing is the fact that there's places like Advance. And I think the fact that we haven't had a place where people can go to and for mentorship and for hopefully seating, you know what I mean? So that never existed in our music industry. So hopefully that might be another solution.
And just before we finish off on the on the whole succession retention thing, when you're talking about other companies that don't have Black people in there, what's the action point? I mean, what it is it comes down to, there's just an economic incentive, right? If you're a company, especially in 2020, one of the beautiful things that we've seen over the last couple of years is you're seeing creatives, you're seeing talent find their voice, right? So whether that's athletes, whether that's artists, whether that's other forms of creative producers, realizing that they have a voice and a power beyond just, I just do this, just beyond shut up and dribble kind of thing. And that pressure is inevitably going to get applied on companies that lack the representation. So either they can get out in front of it and look good, or they can not get out in front of it and look like assholes at the end of the day, right? So it's not really like not an action point, but it's just more of a reality of the situation. I think that is why companies are more open to it right now, is because they recognize the reality of what's happening, right? So there is a window now to do things, and the conversations I've been having with businesses and companies where there's no representation, people are like, at least now they're verbally saying, yeah, I guess we should do something about that. Whereas before they probably never, that was never the thing. Before it was just like, yeah, it's cool, business as usual, why not? Right. So, and it's a small shift, but it's a shift that starts, right?
Sorry, Craig, before I move on, Craig, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Miro said, I mean, I know, Miro, you said it's just good business, right? Which makes total sense, right? That is as sensible as you can get. But in this country, historically, it's just been ignored, right? It's been like, genre specific marketing is it's a waste of time. We don't need to do that. It's, everybody can do anything, but that's what's said. But when you see it portrayed, especially within I think a labels aspect of things, it's, yeah, you're saying that on one end, but is the black marketing person getting the next big rock release from the Heritage Rock Band? No. But the kid who markets and says, hey, I kind of like rap music or whatever, that person will get the biggest rap release to work on. You know what I mean? It's something about, I think you had to bring it back to just an overall respect for the culture itself, which I think our industry lacks. And the analogy I like to use, which is pretty straightforward for all of us who work in this industry, who've worked in this industry, is we as a bunch of Anglophones living, born, raised in Ontario, there is no way they would send a bunch of us to Quebec and say, okay, you guys run the Quebec branch, right? It would be crazy. People's heads would explode over, like, it would be crazy in Quebec. People would be like, the disrespect, what about the French culture? What about our heritage? Blah, blah. And no one would even think about doing that. But when it comes to black music, it's the most malleable thing in our industry, apparently. It's like, you get a turn, you get a turn, you get a turn. And then after listening to it for a couple of years, you can then become an expert. You know what I mean? So it's almost, what happens is I think the overall respect has to be given to the genre within our country, I think. They don't have that problem in the US or the UK, but we have that problem here. Or they don't have that problem in France, but we have that problem here. So I think it starts from there, and you can't, until that happens, I think you can't change from that point.
And one solution, just to really quickly, sorry, Ian, is from a government perspective, when it came to gender, and there wasn't enough women in board positions, on seats, etc., what they created was this framework called GBA, gender-based analysis, where within a certain amount of time, any publicly traded company was required and mandated to have a certain percentage of women on the board. So I don't want to say it's easy, but another solution is applying the same type of thing. If we're being recognized and they're allocating funding towards us, the same type of thing can be done across industry or across sector, where there's a requirement in terms of, and not diversity, because once they say diversity, they put, a dominant culture woman in the space, but more so specifics, like you said, that attribute to Black, to ensure that there is representation, specifically in the music industry or entertainment and sports, where our community and culture dominate.
And out of curiosity, Jessica, how many years approximately did it take to implement these policies and get women to where they, I mean, obviously they're not equal, but where they needed to be in terms of goals?
It was within 2 to 3 years. So that was the amazing thing. Within 2 to 3 years, they were able to do quick analysis studies to say, okay, now there's 20 to 40% on boards. And that was technology, anything like publicly traded, et cetera. And that continues now. There's a GBA plus, which is supposed to be a catch-all for, racialized orientation, all those other things. But again, with us being the decade of people of African descent and Canada signing on from a UN perspective for that, there is a requirement for us to deliver. So I think there's an opportunity from a public sector, private sector, government, and then within the Black community for us to come together and work on these things, but then also show on a world stage what we've been able to produce over the next 3-4 years.
Okay. So, I mean, we need to move on, but, in terms of solutions or whatever, I just think that, that we're in a place where I'm just going to go out on a limb and speak to these companies and say, you need to make an explicit effort at this point. You need to make clear action as opposed to like just checking boxes. Like there's a million diversity and inclusion positions being created all of a sudden. We need clear action as opposed to empty promises. These efforts begin early. They begin at the hiring stages. They begin as early as like grade school. You guys need to start doing outreach. You need to start doing mentorship programs. Like it's cool for us to talk about us mentoring us. I was mentored by many of you, but we are not all the decision makers in all of the companies. And so to those people, what are the, again, you know, the solutions that we need? Well, we need you to start grooming a range of different types of people inside the companies and providing with them with mentors and sponsors and, you know, like, and skills in governance, so that when positions become available on these boards after these 60, 70-year-old men finally pass, because there's an adage in our industry that white men fall up, right? They just fall from position to position to position to position throughout the boards, throughout the companies, from organization to organization. So you need to start grooming Black talent early and start to, like the political parties do with their youth riding associations, so that they make their way all the way up. And that's what's been done for women in the spaces. So I know I'm going to jump to another space completely, and I'm going to talk about media. I know that Craig is very passionate about this area. We often talk about the inequity in the music industry. You hear people talking about sports all the time and football players and the lack of people in that industry, but I think music is much worse. We are the major contributors to our space, but we are not represented as Black personalities and decision-making executives in the media space. And this has had an impact on our ability to self-determine succession and the creation of an infrastructure. So what contributes to the lack of diversity in the media space? Like what is it that is causing this problem? I know Randy has some thoughts on this earlier when I spoke to him.
Well, the main thing with that is there's an obvious veil or thin layer of xenophobia that's been set up around our culture and around black skin, right? There's no doubt that there's a crafted narrative that makes it uncomfortable for others to sit alongside Black skin and black culture. And until we can normalize that collaboration, then you're gonna run into these scenarios where it's hard to change norms if you're uncomfortable with when you're uncomfortable with the solution.
So, you know, there's been a lot of conversation, and I know you move in the radio space as well. There's been a lot of conversation about the lack of personalities on radio stations in Canada. There's been a lot of conversation about the lack of Black decision makers and executives in that radio space. What is it that needs to be done to change this? Like, what's the impact of not having people from the culture, who create the culture, who understand the culture, controlling the culture? And what is it that we need done? What are the calls to action, and who are they to? Are they to the CRTCs and the Heritage Canadas? Are they to the corporations and the radio stations that own these vast number of radio stations?
Well, it falls in line. Like, I think there's a saying that says, what gets measured gets done. And I think all of us that are talking right now, we're talking about setting quotas and setting some sort of direction for our allies, or quote unquote allies, to follow, where they can basically say, this is what's required to fulfill that necessary connectivity with the Black audience, right?
I wouldn't even call them quotas, I'd say benchmarks. Because there you go, because you're already starting at 1, you can only go up. Right.
But in taking account certain benchmarks in various industries, it allows for these industries and businesses to start taking stock in what they're doing. And then you can talk about all of the sponsorship and mentorship that needs to take place to ensure that we're ready to take on that shared accountability of those roles. All of that is necessary, but it's one of those things where you talk about economics. Until we can ensure that opportunity is in line with compensation that allows for that person to stay in that role and grow. That's a key piece that's missing right now. So a lot of our solutions are mentorship, sponsorship, bringing somebody up. And my world that I live in, we do that as a regular thing. But as a CEO, another part of the hat that I have to wear is, how can I fund and make sure that there's enough on the table for all of these trained and able bodies to eat? And that's a component where when we're discussing these solutions, we also have to take on the economic lens that allows for these things to be sustainable, so that people can grow through the pipeline and still be able to pay rent, pay their bills, and do all of those different types of things. And that's where I think there needs to be benchmarks, to Jessica's point, benchmarks set throughout various industries and maybe even led through government to allow for exchange of commerce in areas that aren't typically being invested in right now. So when advertisers aren't investing into Black media, when advertisers aren't investing into Black-led businesses, there needs to be benchmarks set in place to help them, to help inspire and encourage them to do some of that work, which makes our jobs as leaders a lot easier, because we know that there's going to be a layer of support to allow us to continue to nurture more talent. But the worst thing to do is to nurture talent and then tell them they have to go to the States to get a job.
Well, and that's the other piece, just really quickly, in terms of setting the benchmarks. One of the things that we did was, being in the tech and innovation space, we looked at the incubator system. A number of them are funded. So it's not even that the investment's not there. The money is there. Like, it blew my mind. I thought private sector there was funding. There's funding in the private sector had money, public sector has a ton of funding. They all have money. It's how they choose to allocate those resources. So if there is a benchmark in terms of how the funding is spent, and you're able to put that against how it's invested and spent, that's another way that we can look at developing that talent. Because to your point, when you look at the representation on media, you know, T-Rex just being promoted, or other people in media now, because of everything going on, being promoted, it's because we were able, like you said, to keep him. But the other people who have left, you know, Namageni's left and came back. There's been, you know, Matt, sorry, I can't remember his name, but the guy who's on Entertainment Tonight.
Babel.
Yeah, about Babel, exactly. All of those guys who have left. So it's also reallocating that funding to ensure that it's getting to people, like you said, so you don't have to finish an internship and be like, good luck, figure it out, that you're able to sustain them and help them move forward.
So we're talking about benchmarks. Who are the main actors in this change, and what is it that we're asking them to do in terms of benchmarks? I saw MIRO on a call with Heritage Canada and CIMA, and you were talking about a 25% benchmark in one area. What is it that we need to do? And, you know, I heard a statement that there are no race-based statistics, so we don't even know what the scope of the issue is. What needs to be done in order to set up to create a benchmark? And then what is it that we are looking for in a benchmark? Is it 7% of all media spends need to go to Black companies? What is it? Is it government initiatives to, you know, like if I move my business to Milton, they'll give me a tax holiday. What is it that we want them to do?
Well, I think part of it is Eglinton West, right? They're going through, it's Little Jamaica, they're going through the Metro links. There's a possibility that we could lose all the heritage that goes with that. There's things like, again, beyond the tax incentives, but also creating other economic incentives and plans from a government perspective that are mandated so that everyone's held accountable. But sorry, go ahead, Randy.
I was going to say, one of the solutions that I did have down was it needs to be a pairing between private sector and public sector. So where the government can influence change is one of those things like Ian talked about, a tax credit. If there was a 13% tax credit where businesses were rewarded for spending into Black-led or Black-focused cultural campaigns. If they got a 13%.
And that's what they do in the States, and New York has a few programs.
Exactly.
New York has a few programs, and then from being New York City has a few programs, and their commissioner of small business is Grenadian. But the other thing is,
so what you guys are saying is bringing an incentive into the music industry sector to make people spend
entertainment across the board.
Well, the Black entertainment sector, bringing in a best benchmark that would basically enable companies to spend money within Black. Like, let's say, like if they sign a Black artist, if they are spending money, if you're going to company that's Black, there's basically a kickback to them that would help boost up more activity for Black artists, and in turn, there's an incentive for them. Is that
not even just artists, like you're saying, events, all of those things, because that's the other challenge we face, right? Caravana comes around, nobody wants to rent you a space, all of those elements as well. And the other thing is when you ask, like, set a number. So Black North Initiative has asked all the major corporations to hire 3.5% of their, or have 3.5% of their board reflect Black community. So 3.5 is the percentage of Black people across Canada. So if they wanted to, just statistically, if there's 3.5% Black people in Canada, then technically most boards or most organizations should be able to reflect that if you wanted to go at the bare minimum. So there's like a starting point and what's something that's actually already happening or in action.
I think in the music industry, we want to look at higher numbers because of, you know, the music industry is a unique economic situation, because what you have is the revenue that's being generated from the creative product, which the entire industry depends on, is a lot of that revenue comes from Black talent, and there's a disproportionate, you know, situation here where you don't have that same representation on the business side, on the other side of the equation. And, you know, in terms of, I like the idea of tax credits, but I don't think it should be tied to signing Black artists. Anything about this is about building the business side of it. So if you are going to make money off of the culture on one side, you have to got to put back into the pump. You can't just take, right? To me, that's the concept that needs consistency across the board.
To flush it out further, I would say that tax credit is key to a point. It needs to be two-pronged. Business also needs to be involved in it. So it's a tax credit that involves investment into Black entertainment across the board. Every time you invest in Black business, every time you invest in Black entertainment, there's a 13% credit. That allows us to go to private sector now. And in private sector, drum up opportunities where now if you spend 10% of your ad spend on Black culture, what you're doing now is you're changing the narrative. And it makes Black culture and Black skin a lot more tangible. And, right. And in that situation, then you'll see more opportunities for Black people to work in various industries, because now their voice is going to carry a lot further, because there's actually a dollar figure, an economic scale to their contributions.
Yes.
Where without those credits and without that incentive to spend money towards Black-led and Black-focused initiatives, there's no economic impetus for them to hire and nurture Black people, and that stuff needs to change, because rooted in all of that is the systemic layer of xenophobia that they have around Black skin in the first place. So there needs to be a decided benchmark set where we're going to create more Black content. We know that they're taking advantage or leveraging a lot of the content that we already create, but more so, we need to normalize the experience of Black culture so that there's more opportunities for Black people to contribute in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things
we talked about Quebec before.
On the advanced side is that kind of audit, right? To be able to quantify some of those situations and that data. So then, to your point, Randy, you know, when you're talking to businesses, you can say, well, look, this is what the situation is. This is where the value is. This is where the value gap is, right?
Exactly that.
Okay. You're talking about Quebec before, Craig, and that's exactly what Quebec did. Quebec built itself based on what? The French society here was ostracized by all the English people who were controlling all the businesses. Mm-hmm. And slowly, the government started putting in place rules and regulations that protected the people. It made it more advantageous for a business to hire a French person, made it a lot easier to hire a French person. To this day, it's very difficult if you're Anglophone to work in Quebec. And they protect their culture. So I do believe that what you were saying before is, if you set up a structure where, for a business, and from a business management point of view, they're going to hire whoever makes sense and whoever actually brings revenues in. So if you make it such that there's R&D, Canada developed an R&D. Why is tech so big in Canada? R&D tax credits. Why are so many movies done in Vancouver and Quebec? Tax credits. You just put an incentive in place. People will come from all over the world. Americans come, set up Canadian corporations, open them up, do the tax credits, and close a couple corporations and leave. If we did the same thing, I'm sure we can find an incentive to make it worth everybody's while to hire a Black person especially as Miro was saying, to pump it back in. You can't just take it out.
Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Here's where the tax credit thing for signing an artist, I like it, but I don't, because then what could happen is companies will then just try to sign Black talent to take advantage of the tax credits. I mean, there needs to be, I think, something like that, or grants or something like that along that line. There has to be criteria, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, there has to be criteria set in place. Like, I'm fully on board with, you know, saying like, okay, you want to get some of this money? What's your infrastructure? Does your infrastructure fit this criteria? Do you have people in place to do this, this, and this, and this, which is directly related to the culture?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the important part for me, is that, like I said before, it's like we've spent a lot of years focused on the artist side, and that's not a wrong place to be. I think it's one of the focuses. But if we just were to say, oh, well, you'll get tax credits for signing more Black music, that's just half the pie. Like, we have to fill in the other side and
Rest of the infrastructure.
Who is working on this stuff, because this is the part that we have to equate. It's like, you know, everybody has been saying for the last little while, they like Black culture, but they don't like Black people. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a very real thing. And that thought process cuts across a lot of places. And when you bring it to the business, you know, world that we're talking about right now, it's so stark, it's ridiculous. Like, all you have to do is express a love for hip hop, and all of a sudden you're like the fucking head cook and bottle watch of all hip hop in Canada. Like, it's just ridiculous. But you know, and the respect, I think somebody else was saying on, I think your last panel, I think it was Vanessa, was talking about, I'm of the culture, I'm of the age, I am the person, I am the touch point you're supposedly trying to reach, and yet you bypass me and go talk to everybody else but the person that you're trying to like actually like get to, you know. And I think that's that piece right there that I think all of what you guys are talking about, where it comes to incentives and whether or not we start a mentor program and we give an incentive to a person internal in a company to take on a true mentor and really, you know, be a mentor no matter what they are or who they are. I think all of those are real, you know, things that need to happen, but we also have to have that to say, you know, and have that extend to Black businesses and using Black providers. So you're doing a video for a hip hop artist. Did you first make sure to look and find out if there was a Black stylist? Because again, it's a big part of our culture. This isn't just we put on some clothes from H&M. Did you find someone that's of the culture? Did you at least try to look at it? Did you try to look for a Black photographer? Just like how we're now aware of, we want women in the room when we're working with women. Like, you know, oh, let's go find a female director, a female photographer, or whatever. Just like you're aware of that and you understand why that might be important, understand that we aren't just, this isn't just a skin tone, it's a culture to us. And so if you don't understand that, then you're missing part of the situation here. And it isn't just that you like our culture or you like our music or you like our food. So when you're out here making suppliers and you're trying to make an ecosystem, you got to fill the whole ecosystem up. You know, I don't have a problem with people saying, I would like to try and find a Black business manager, or I'd like to find a Black PR person, or I don't have a problem with people saying that, because I understand why they're saying it. You have less conversation to have. If you're a Black artist and you don't have to go through the concept of explaining you're here and that it takes 6 hours to get your damn Beyonce braids done. Like, it's just understood that this is what happens with Black women in, you know, and they're just certain things that you understand. And if you don't normalize that, and I think that's the word I'm trying to find here, if you don't normalize that it's okay to make an overt decision to hire within the culture for these things within our business, then you're never going to change. And that's what I hope people do, is they normalize that it's okay. Like, I remember having a discussion very early on when somebody said, you know, I grew up, a head of one of our companies said, I grew up thinking I wanted to be that person that said I didn't see color. And now I realize and understand that that's an error to say that, because you're discounting that part of us when you say you don't see color. I need you to see the color. I need you to see the culture, and then make overt decisions, and do not feel bad. No one is going to make you feel bad. You think I look at somebody that says they're going to go find someone in Nashville to do XYZ because of country? I'm not even questioning it in a million years. And that person could be black, white, or purple. But I understand what you're trying, the connection point you're trying to make. You're saying this person is of the culture, no matter what they are. And I respect that you're saying that, just like with the Francophone thing. So I'm not going to have a problem if you tell me that you would like to try and find a black photographer. Like, there was a big thing that came up about Annie Leibovitz and what's that gymnast name that was on the cover of Vanity Fair? And everybody had like a rightfully so, a hissy fit because of how she looked. And somebody, you know, so many people, black photographers, went and recolored the picture and just said, like, this is the simplest thing we're talking about. Yeah, this is Annie Leibovitz, but Annie Leibovitz is not going to let go of her brand. And because she doesn't let go of her brand, she shot a black woman and made her look, frankly, disgusting. Had they just said, let's go find a black photographer to do this, the change would have been like dramatic. And it leads to what Jessica and other people are saying about representation. If you don't see those things, you don't think you can become those things. And that part, to me, is the overt thing has to happen.
And the other thing is, even to get to that point, the part of the reason Vanity Fair probably picked Annie Leibovitz is because she's part of their procurement system. So when they're going through the system to look at who they're going to hire, she's already in the system. They can already pay her. They can do all of those things, as we've all, like you said, the photographers, the makeup artists, etc. So part of the other piece is ensuring that there's a diverse pipeline in terms of procurement. So just like at Black History Month, they know when to go and find, you know, the black caterers and all those things. But part of the other thing is making sure that they start building those things and putting those pieces in place early, so that, again, by the time they need you, they already have you in the system. It's not a workaround, or it's not excuses as to why they can't hire you or they can't bring in this person or that person. Starting from a solutions point and from the dominant culture, these are some of the things that they need to do. So start building their procurement system, start getting people in the system as vendors of record and all of those other things, so that by the time it comes around, you're already in the system and you're good to go. And I'm sure, like, graphic artists, all of you can relate to that.
So why do we think that there isn't enough black culture in the pipeline already? Do we think it's because they've omitted it, or do we think it's because there's not enough? They don't see the connection to their year-round product.
Some of it's just lazy, to be honest. We go back to the same pipeline that we always went to, and it's not bad. It's like, I've worked with this person, I know they deliver on time, this is what they do, da 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 da. So in order to change that, two things need to happen. You need to understand that it is important, and the reason why we have nonsensical things like H&M does a t-shirt with the monkeys on it is because a person was missing from the room. If the person is missing from the room, you're always going to get the same result.
But Vivian, were they missing from the room, or were they afraid to open their mouth, or not put in a position to open their mouth?
In the case of H&M, they probably weren't in the room, but the chances are they weren't in the room, and they don't feel like they have the ability to speak up. And so until you make an overt decision as a company to say, yeah, I realize we've used XYZ photographer for the last 50 million things, but we want to actually say, is this person comfortable? Will this young Black 18-year-old girl be comfortable in this situation with this exact situation, and not feel bad about making that decision? Because as much as people feel bad about being called racist and being thought to be racist or have racist actions, overtly or otherwise, they also seem to feel really badly and feel very concerned about being seen to now make overt decisions like they're just ticking a box. And it's like, you're not just ticking a box, you're doing the right thing for this situation, and you got to normalize that.
So I think that the part of the problem is that, like, they need to understand, as Miro kind of spoke to, that it's just good business. The uniformity that comes from the antiquated recruitment practices, the antiquated, you know, the lack of diversity in these companies means that the network of individuals that you're working with that are recommended for these positions are limited and homogeneous. Like, it's ridiculous, right? And so this reliance on familiar individuals in existing networks, like, to assure this level of quality or qualification that you're talking about, Vivian, and competence, is also impeding their ability to make money, right? Because diversity is about more than optics. It's about fresh insights. It's about, and we, like, frankly, we are the culture. You know what I mean? Like, Craig has been very quiet. He's usually shouting about this, but we're the culture, right? Like, diversity leads to better decisions.
Cultural appropriation. It's cultural appropriation in the highest order. It's institutionalized. It's been continued on for decades, and then it's almost like, you know, it's like we're on our way, and then everything just got erased and wiped away, and a few of us were left around as kind of remnants of that time, and it just hurt a lot of development. And you know, it's really weird, you know, to navigate through a space and through an industry where you're kind of like, you know you're a big part of it, but your identity is not recognized, and it's genre specific. And it's been that way, and it's not just. I'll tell you something. There was a situation. I'll tell you a quick story. A situation with a young dude who grew up in this market, used to, you know, be a part of the culture, DJ, mixtapes, whole 9 yards. Managed to get an internship at a U.S. major for a summer. Came back, honed his skills. One of the labels in the city was interviewing for an A&R job. That same person went, interviewed for the A&R job. And the person interviewing him looked at his resume and to the interview said, yeah, you know, you're not gonna make it in the music business. It's not gonna work here. And the person who was getting interviewed, he said, well, why? He said, well, because you specialize in urban music, and that doesn't work here.
Yeah.
Right? So that person then decided, okay, well, shit, okay, I'm going to go to New York, set up shop, and try to do something there. Now, that person, and I'm not spilling the tea, that person is Mr. Morgan. And he's not even black.
So,
like, that's a true story. And I don't want it to, because the executive who gave him that interview is still in this industry today. And I have great dialogue with that person, so I'm not going to call that person out, but that actually happened. Now, in the context, you look where Morgan is right now, like, those are the sort of people that have been discouraged from our industry from jump. And you're talking about a mentality. This is a mentality that came about in the mid-90s. It's carried on.
Actually, the mentality is longer than that, man. The mentality, the mentality is longer than that. We're talking, you know, since existence. It's just, you know, you're, and you say one specific genre, but really it's happening to Black artists and Black professionals and people that want to be in the industry supporting Black music has always been that challenge.
So here's the deal. Like, I think we've established over 9 weeks that there is a systemic barrier for growth and opportunity in the industry, and I'm clear on that, right? When we talk about solutions for all of this, if we're optimistic and we believe that that allies within the industry, decision makers and heads of industry are able to help us overcome some of these hurdles. The question for me, the real root of the answer is the fact that like I said before, it's uncomfortable to make change. And we're asking our allies to sit in a space where they're going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to surround myself with Black bodies, Black faces, Black conversations that I have I'm not oriented around. So part of it is we as leaders need to be able to, have spaces with them where we could coach them up and support them through the process, and also help them, whether it's through advance or other types of projects, provide opportunities where we can refer the right type of talent, nurture that talent, sponsor the talent, mentor the talent, et cetera, et cetera. But like MIRO said earlier, and like I discussed again, it has to make economic sense. There has to be those incentives in place so that while they're going through this uncomfortable curve of recognizing the value of Black culture, that they're also we're also nurturing them to ensure that this is a sustainable practice that we're going to be heading down, and it's not just a one-off trend that we're kind of like riding the wave until the wave dies off. We need to. It comes down to business, and we need to get into the whole aspect of how can we get those allies thinking optimistically. How can we get those allies to work with us, understanding that they're just as so we have to deal with uncomfortable every day as Black people. So when we're working in these industries, we're always uncomfortable, but we've been dealing with it for our whole life. Our allies are just potentially starting to enter into that space. What can we do to support them? And maybe that's a Jessica question.
Well, I mean, there's reports that are out there, including the McKinsey and Co. Diversity Matters, that gives like hard facts in terms of how diversity equates to dollars and cents. And more importantly, the losses that organizations or businesses will suffer if they don't make diversity an imperative. Recently, I think this February, they put out another report that was specific to Black women and how to support Black women and how Black women are leading the charge in terms of entrepreneurship. If you look at, again, more so the music industry in the US, there's quite a few women that are trailblazing in the space, and how when you solve for Black women, it's there's another study, Black women first or Black women best, where if you solve for Black women, you solve for the entire society, because we face so much. I think Canada, the only people, and not to make it a Prussian Olympics, that suffer or face more are Aboriginal and First Nations women. But outside of that, if you look at the global context, if you're able to solve and support Black women, you're guaranteed to be able to, like, all boats and all tides will rise. So looking at reports like the McKinsey Diversity Matters, they have a few other ones that have come out, but then also looking at best practices and looking at what happens when you don't support. So for example, there was I guess a case study with Futurepreneur, where they ran into some challenges when they didn't take a full stand on anti-Black and anti-xenophobia or systemic racism, and seeing how, especially in this cancel culture, I mean, we've seen what's happened in the US with the murder of George Floyd, Sandra Bland, everyone else. And part of the impetus or catalyst, that I dare to say, of Canada responding so quickly was because we didn't want to experience or see that here. Because it's not for a lack of us, and I don't think it's about us as a community or Black people not being supportive, whether it's in the music industry or other industries, or not being open. I think if anything, part of our challenge is similar to what Oko was saying about Montreal. We're too open. And so what happens is they come to us and take our ideas and take the information, and then you'll have a dominant culture person go and reiterate it. And to Vivian's point, they're the ones that are lauded and seen as, you know, the next coming of Christ. Whereas it was, you know, MIRO's point or MIRO's idea from the get-go. So I think it's about using some of those tools and tactics, like the McKinsey report, like we did an incubator report that looked at the incubators, and we studied the tech incubator. So we chose them because they're heavily funded by the government, whether it's like 400 million for one, 65 million for another. We looked at their board of directors, senior management, entrepreneur-facing staff, so the people who deal with the small business owners on a day-to-day, and then we looked at the community for an ecosystem approach, because it's also about accountability. So we can't sit here as Black people and say it's their fault, they can't look at us or they can't look at other people and say whatnot, but we made sure we had the benchmarks in place. And then we looked at it to say, these are the facts. From there, we're able to say, these are some of the solutions, but this is more importantly, how as an ecosystem and how we're all connected, we need to work together. So I think it's some of those things in terms of looking at the reports and stats that are out there, but also looking at best practices around the world in terms of what Pepsi's done. Some of the other companies that have been forthcoming in their numbers, but I think there's still a lot of work to do. There's the Google reports where they talk about their diversity, not much has changed. Nike has some interesting studies or information in their corporate reports about diversity and what they've been able to accomplish. But there's Pepsi is another good case study in terms of, there's a group called CCDI where they measure diversity. So Pepsi's been pretty forward. They had a South Asian president. They produced the likes of Bozoma St. John, who's been a industry/tech titan and trailblazing now it's the CMO. So yeah.
Just sorry to cut you off. I
Okay.
don't mean to keep cutting you off, but
It's
we're
okay.
coming up on a 2-hour mark now, and I
Ooh.
don't want to keep people on too much longer, but I do want to get to a point of just getting what we need done here. So I want to ask Ian to jump in here for a second.
So I want to jump back to a point that both Randy and Craig were kind of talking about, and we were talking about, and Jessica, with benchmarks. In episode 2, I remember Aisha Wickham said that the evolution of the Canadian music industry was birthed out of the concept of CanCon. 30% of radio stations' playlists being Canadian to protect those musics and to protect Canadian music from American music. The outcome was that the number of radio stations focused on playing genres outside of Black music, they developed an infrastructure that supported populating those stations heavily with rock and country and other things. And so my question is, in terms of representation and protection, what do you see, and I think C and Randy, you guys might be able to answer this, what needs to be done in radio with respect to protecting our music, and what's the solution there?
Actually, I'll let Craig go first.
Yeah, I'll just go first from my perspective, because it's been a thorn in my side for a long time. I think that, and this is just me talking, I think that I really feel that what needs to be done is, it has to somehow mirror the US top 40 charts. There has to be, our top 40 should somehow mirror the US top 40, which is, anywhere from 10% and up of Black music at any time in rotation. I believe that some of the radio networks need to just take a chance and form a network of Black radio stations across the country and stick with them, and not do it as a 1-year plan, 2-year plan. Like, it's a 5-year plan, and if it need be, you bring in maybe someone who, proper consultants who've done Black radio before in the past and stuff like that. And I think that infrastructure needs to be put in place. Also with CanCon, I think CanCon needs to be kind of overhauled. Many people don't know, even when CanCon was being formed, the radio industry fought CanCon, and they said back then, you can't play 30% Canadian music because our listeners won't listen. Right.
Well, it wasn't that the fact that they didn't think that listeners wouldn't listen. They also didn't think that there was enough good Canadian content to put on the radio. And so what happened from that is that money from the radio broadcasters, Standard Broadcasting, for example, had to actually put money into record companies to actually go and make records that they play on the radio. And and if you go look at Canadian Talent Library, majority of the stuff they signed, yes, one of those records was Salome Bay, but a lot of them were white people. So like when you look at this is where I'm going, where I think that there's an idea here of enforcing and reforming the idea of, if you're gonna of putting in I like the idea of going to CRTC or going to somebody to say that if you have to play Black music and it has to be a certain amount of Canadian music that is Black.
Yeah.
I think by doing you enforce a change that is going to happen within our industry that is needed.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
100%.
go ahead, Craig. Yep.
Yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Craig.
Yeah, just to add to that, and you know, I mean, they need to create that kind of system and infrastructure, because at the end of the day, like there's a couple other countries in the world that have something like CanCon. France has it, for instance. And the thing about France is their system, their French rotations are higher than the international rotations. But in Canada, the international rotations are higher than the CanCon, which is like, it's like with Canadian radio station. It's crazy. It's crazy.
No, I would say, no, a lot of that is economics though, and we've always sort of like fallen under the bright lights of the States. They've always influenced a lot of what we've done. But more importantly, I think by taking that language back, calling it Black music, going to the CRTC and saying, we want you to have another benchmark for Black music, whether it be CanCon or otherwise, have all of those stations. I don't know if the network of Black radio stations will work if we don't have people investing into Black business, right? So I think that's definitely has to be a two-pronged type of approach that has to happen. But before we even get people investing into Black business, let's get, because we're already playing, arguably, we're already playing Black music, and we can argue that Black music is top 10 music in the country. Let's just ensure that they're playing Black music across the board, and then we can grow the business aspect of it so that there's balance there. So that when if you're a black radio announcer, you can work at a pop station because they're playing music that reflects your
Black Canadian. Like it baffles me when Jay Devenish was on doing one of the roundtables. He had brought up the fact that like it's crazy that you have Division selling out like 6 nights at the drive-in, but can't be heard on any radio stations in this country.
Exactly. So make the benchmarks where they have to play the divisions, because it's not like they're not consumable products. It's not like people don't want Division, don't want Party Next Door, don't want whatever. It's their choosing to play what is more accessible to them versus those artists, because they just don't know those artists. Well, if CRTC created a benchmark where you have to play specifically Black music, and when I say Black music, it doesn't have to be delivered by a Black person, just Black music, right? If they're playing Black music, then it creates a runway or a pathway for them to hire people who can speak to that culture.
And the important, and can I just say one last thing? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Sure. The other important thing to add to that, and the reason why radios come into this mix, and Vivian, this is something that I'm sure you understand as a publisher, Whitney brought this up, is the fact that like a lot of income that come to artists and to companies is through radio. You know, radio, and if you have a hit song at radio, there's a lot of money to be made in that space than there is based on like, you know, consumption on Spotify, unless you're hitting hundreds of millions of streams. So we're out of that equation economically in the space of the music industry when we can't even tap into that type of money.
Yeah, well, I mean, also it's like, you know, CanCon is, as a publisher, forget the Black music element. CanCon doesn't do a lot for songwriters or songs, because the reality of the situation is the way the Maple is set up. You can have 2 of those things that have nothing to do with the artist and the song, and it be Canadian. So you can you have people who are from Australia who have CanCon songs. It has nothing to do with Canadians, really. At the end of the day, like, you know, it serves the investment perspective, but it doesn't necessarily help. And yes, so you know, the danger you have with that, of course, is you don't have all those things that Randy's talking about. Like, you just don't have people who are making decisions about that situation when it comes to the music. So I think a benchmark is helpful. I don't know if a benchmark is going to help any more than the CanCon itself help, because you get to a point where it's like, oh, now Canadian music becomes the general pop music of the world, and you can get away calling it CanCon, by playing the most mainstream of Canadian music of multiple genres, and the people who are developing and that it was meant to work for doesn't necessarily get helped. So I think there's a nuance there where it comes to that kind of thing, where it comes to radio. I don't know if I've ever, that's what my degree is in, that's what my first love is, but I don't know that I've ever, in fact, to get into Ryerson, my essay was on CanCon. To get into my degree for radio and TV, I analyzed CanCon. And, I don't know that's the solution, but I think there's a nuance in there that we all need to try and figure out what that is. And hopefully with some of the groups that we're trying to put together, even over at Advance, that maybe people will start to bring the right people in the room, and we'll have some real frank conversation and figure out what it is. But when you have higher ups at radio networks in this country literally just saying, we will never, just blatantly, we will never play more Black music on a station like this, it's a very hard, it's a very hard place to go to. And it's a similar thing where it's like, there was a woman in, I don't know if anybody remembers this, a couple of years ago, there was a women in radio thing that was happening at CMW. And it was literally all older white women that were on this panel. And then they had put, at the time, the executive director of Women in Music, or the person that was not Samantha, but someone else that worked there, on the panel. And, Women in Music made a point to go back and say, like, guys, like, this needs to change. This is not representative, because, we talked earlier on about how people like to equate the word with diversity with, we just pack it with a bunch of women, specifically white women, and all of a sudden we become superbly diverse, right? They forget the intersection of the stuff. And, what Sam was saying, I remember during that time, was that she had never been more frustrated in her life to have a conversation with these older white women specifically about how not diverse they were and how not representative this panel of women in music, women in radio were. And, they were throwing around things like, we can't find these people to talk to and all this kind of bullshit. And it was just like, no, you're not trying. You're just not trying. You haven't asked anybody the question, because if you were to look around for 2 seconds, there are Black women in the media landscape, that you could ask to be representative. And so, radio is a different beast. And I've said this very controversially, I'm sure, to a lot of people, which is that we tend to equate, in this country especially, radio with the music industry. Everybody, when they want to start freaking out about our representation, always tend to go to radio. And I'm not saying that's not one area that needs to be tackled, but it isn't the only part of the radio industry. We're getting, and I agree with Click 100%, the money we're making over there, and I can say this as, for people representing songs and songwriters, is much greater, over there. So we do need to be a part of that ecosystem. But, I also say, like, if, the dinosaurs will eventually pass away and they will have to change, we can help them along as we're getting there. But I also say focus on the shit that where we are there, and then figure out how to fill in the blanks. We're dominating on the digital space from a music perspective. We need to fill in the blanks now on the business side of that. As for radio, I'm not saying I've totally given up on it. I will never say that. That's my diehard love, but I'm not as enthusiastic about trying to to solve this. It should have been solved by now. So it's not an easy place.
To your point, I would say, when I talk about media, I'm talking about media across the board. Television, radio, internet, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm more apt to talk about that than just focus on radio, because I
agree with you. But what I was gonna say is, if there is a benchmark for playing Black music on all of those different platforms, and there's an incentive, whether it be in a tax credit or otherwise, then you're forced to hire people who know how to navigate those conversations. And if they're in the room, getting the third, fourth, fifth artist where you're not so stuck on The Weeknd, Drake, Jesse Riaz, you actually can go a little further because you grew up with it. Those natural connections are going to come because you're hiring people who already exist in that ecosystem. So you're going to get more representation, a more depth of representation of Black artists, because you have Black people in the room that consume the music. But until you set up a structure where you have to play the music, you don't even have to entertain that conversation. And that's all I'm saying. It's kind of like it's a domino effect.
Yeah, and I think Craig pointed out something that's very important as well in terms of this domino effect that you're talking about, which is that CanCon is broken. And so if we're talking about solutions and we're talking about restructuring things, and we know that CanCon is broken, if these radio stations have heavily relied on rock music and country and other genres that are outside of the scope of what it is that today we define as pop music, right? What's happening is that those remnants of that old time, right, even though people are consuming and discovering music in different ways today, as you guys are talking about DSPs, etc., the monetization of our music is the way that, like, these radio stations, what they're playing as pop music, the monetization of commercial music is what is pervasive as a way for labels and managers and to decide who they're going to sign and work with too. And so that indirect impact of CanCon still being stuck in a different time period is hurting our ability to build an infrastructure for Canadian artists as well, right? So, Click, I think we're pretty much at I think we're like 2 hours.
One thing, Ian, just I would say, in asking for a black music representation across media, that's not a setup. We've proven, and there's data that supports that you'll actually be making money. It's an economic play as much as it's because the population of Canada is moving towards that diverse demographic being the majority. So having people who know how to navigate and really juice that model is going to be to the industry's benefit more so than a deficit. So it's not like we're saying, do this because you've been profiting from us. Do this because you can better profit from this moving forward.
And if they don't, and if they haven't learned anything, they should look at technology. Technology came in and cannibalized the music industry. They didn't want to let go of the sales from CDs. They want to let go of that. It's okay, some 16-year-old Napster, and the rest is history from Serato all the way through. So there you go. Sorry, go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's funny because economically speaking, you can make that argument, but here's where it's different in this country, because in the US, the rating system, the rating boxes are distributed in every radio market according to local census data.
Yeah.
Therefore, if your radio area, if your radio market is made up 40% white, 30% African American, 20% Latino, 10, 15% Asian, whatever it is, that's how those rating companies, that's how they operate in the US. They distribute it according to that. In Canada, they don't do it according to census data. So
that needs to change too, though.
Therefore, the numbers can be fixed. So anything they give you is controlled, right? So the numbers are fake, right? They have made them and given these boxes who they want to give them to, and they've created this false narrative that says, oh, the music doesn't work. Same thing with the testing people. When they test records in the US, it's made up demographically, not just racially, but also gender-based as well. And that's how they make up their testing groups. They don't do it like that here. They just put whoever they want in that room, and so they can come back and tell you didn't test well, right? So it's fixed, right? And Vivian, I agree with you. There's other areas that we need to focus on, but I think those areas are going to be a lot more receptive, and they're not going to be as tough to tackle.
Oh, 100%. That's my point.
Right? It's a bunch of people who have obviously dug their heels in for whatever reason. That's it.
Like literally making statements like we will never change. So to me, that's, you've dug your heels in and you don't actually care what the numbers are. You don't care what the business is. You don't care if it's the right thing or if it's good business. They've just dug their heels in. And I don't know where the breaking point is on that. I'm not sure where that is. And that's why I don't necessarily spend too much of my like popping blood vessels in my eyes to argue about that point anymore, because we've done that. We've been there. We've done that. We've been around for a while. So we've all been there. Shit, I was like, when I was the PD of CKLN, I was the only person again. So I've been arguing about this point now for a really long time. And I'm kind of over arguing about that point. I know somebody else is going to figure it out, but some of the reasons why they're not doing what they're doing, Craig, is exactly your point. It's the decision they wanted to make, because if they wanted to make different decisions, when we transition from the CKLN, CIUT, CHRYs of the world, people like myself, I wouldn't even have had to go sit in a room and go, do you want to hire me? I was the only Black PD in the country. So if you're starting a Black radio station, you would think you would pick up the phone and call and say, hey, which place do you want to land in here? That's not what happened, right? So that's clearly not what they want to do. So I transitioned. I'm not in radio because that wasn't the place for me. And you know, God bless all the people that stay there right now. And I 100% want to figure out how to do it. I'm just saying I no longer bash my head because I'm not as, I can't seem to understand what that problem is and that barriers that we're dealing with. And we all have our opinions about it, but it's definitely partially those things you're talking about and partially just they've dug their heels in. And when the heels break and they go to the graves that they are going to go to, then maybe it'll change.
So I want to start to wrap us up because we're coming into the 2 hour and 15 mark. But I just want to ask a couple of quick questions before I ask you each this question. So think about this question because I'm going to come to you with it. What is the biggest barrier to Black professionals in the industry, and what is it that you think needs to be done about it? I'm going to come back to you with that question, and I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions on the way out. What do we need to do to force accountability? We've talked about representation and representation being a problem in all aspects of the music business. What do we need to do to force accountability on the parts of these organizations, corporations, and associations? What is it that we need to do?
Well, one of the things we can do in Canada, which a lot of places can't do it, is that like it or not, we are a country that is very structured still on having a granting system, on having government money play a big part in it. And to Jessica's point is that this is the place where we can literally, they've already done it. This is the place where you put it down. I was hosting something for another organization that should be predominantly Black and is predominantly white. And what I said, one of the things I said was, look, just now, I can't see a lot of granting systems giving you overhead money if you continue to be the way you are. If you claim that you are an organization that represents a music that is historically known as Black music and is a Black music in everybody else's mind, and you are an all-white organization, it is going to cease to be logical for granting organizations to continue to support you, especially with overhead money. And I think that's where the pressure goes in order to use what we have already going for us, which is we have a government system that likes to give money to things. And that's where you put those benchmarks and say, are you filling in these blanks here? Because it's important to us as a government, provincially, federally, wherever. And that's where you'll start to see some changes because that's where the money is coming from. A lot of these organizations and companies use that money.
100%. And because even major labels use that money, independent labels use that money, all across the infrastructure. And Viv, that's a great point, is that's an area where we can say, look, Black people form a portion of the population. We pay taxes. If taxes are going if our taxes are going to fund that in part, and yet we're proportionally underrepresented on the granting side, on the business side of it, then that's problematic, right?
Okay.
So.
And not just from a financial standpoint, but from a worth standpoint as well. So know our value in terms of voting, because we will dictate the government that dictates how the money's spent. So understanding and leveraging that power, that I don't think, and I'll say this from my personal experience, our community does very well in terms of mobilizing. If you look at government right now, how many Black MPs do we have? How many South Asian MPs are there? How many other cultures? We're not represented. It's the money piece, but it's also the influence and power that goes hand in hand to get things done.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what actions need to be taken to track progress You know, all these things are being done and we're talking about all these things. How do we track progress and how do we monitor it after this moment is over?
So again, impact measurement framework is necessary that addresses what Big C was talking about. The fact that they're choosing not to identify the writing that's on the wall, that there are impacts of our culture across the country that are dictating this is where the economics are shifting. So if there is an impact measurement framework that's agreed upon at the government level and then funded so that we can do the proper census data that's required to support all of these conversations, that would be a next step. Where we don't have MPs and MPPs, there's at least data that supports the reality of where the winds of change are shifting.
Okay, so we're asking for institutional evaluations and assessments, research, and then we want to provide these to the policymaking entities, or
specific to the Black experience. That definitely has to be where the data is rooted. But then all of that information goes to the commissions and the roundtables that basically lead where laws and policies are created.
Okay.
Right. So it's more of a federal document for sure.
Okay. Anyway, so I mean, this has been great. We are literally at the 2-hour and 25-minute mark, so I don't want to keep us any longer. But I'm going to ask each of you in order before I invite Stuart back onto the call. In your opinion, what is the single biggest barrier to the development of Black music and the Black music infrastructure in Canada? And what is the solution that you see for it, or what is it that you would like to see done? And anybody can jump first.
I think I said it earlier, creation of infrastructure, vertical infrastructure where, you know, people can be developed throughout every level, the beginning, the middle, the top. And that's what's needed. We need to reintroduce that. And what is it that you would like? So that's what you'd like to see done. What is it like that you would like to see these companies do in achieving that goal? I think it's pretty simple, but I think they need to hear it out loud.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's the org chart, there's, and just everybody's got their org chart infrastructure and stuff like that. You can just be like, okay, well, or reach out to your counterparts in the US and UK and say, hey, can I see your Black music infrastructure? And can I then come and recreate this here and then recreate it? Because it's I don't want to oversimplify it, but I mean, of course, it's not going to be as big as the US, but you got to find ways to tool it to make it fit our market. And sorry, Ian, I don't have a more complex answer because I think it's
not complex.
Man. It's pretty straightforward. The blueprint is all around us. It's there.
Yep, pretty simple. It's just, sometimes things need to be said explicitly. I saw this joke about a guy who was going to go out with a Black girl, and he was like, what should I get her to eat, like jerk chicken? And he was like, how do I speak to her? And I was like, the answer is pretty simple. It's just like you would speak to anybody else. The answer is pretty simple. Just look at the way that you do things for everything else and do the same thing, right? Vivian, what would your opinion be on the biggest barriers to the development of Black infrastructure in the country, and what is the solutions that you see to that?
I mean, the biggest barrier right now is everything we've been saying, which is just there is no runway and there is no system right now. And until there is one that's more than lip service, and until the numbers are there, we won't see the progression. I thought we have to have something in the middle to get you from point A to point B. So I completely agree with Craig. We don't all need to say the same thing. And one, he said it perfectly succinctly, and hopefully that's some of the stuff that a group like Advance is going to try and help with. We're not going to be the one solution to everybody's problem, but hopefully we can start to figure out the data to put the numbers behind the problem, using those numbers to help to make solutions. Things like what you guys are doing here with a report which will come out with actual data and questions and solutions and problems. I think all of those things are important. As for what I think we should do, I think we're we're trying, we're starting. I mean, it's never going to be enough for everybody. We're never going to solve everyone's problems. We're never going to be enough for everybody. I just look at the chat and, you know, you can see we're never going to solve everybody's problem. I think the most we can do is commit, those of us that are in positions to make decisions and have budgets that we are in control of, we can start to make it a priority, or continue to make it a priority, to be overt about the decisions we make where it comes to these things, and try to make that known to others that haven't yet gotten to that point, and explain to people why this is important, and why they should also do the same thing and normalize it.
Oko.
Education. I come back to that. I think that the most important thing that we're suffering from is that a lot of younger Black people, men or women that I talk to, whether it's artists or not, only know the artist side of the business. Nobody really understands the publishing side of the business. Nobody understands the legal side of the business. Nobody understands the accounting side of the business. And the simple fact is, because they've not seen other people who look like them, act like them, talk like them, work in that area. So it's us as a group of people, whoever's in it, whoever's been doing it for a while, talking to all the young guys out there and saying, hey, this is something else that you can actually be doing, and you'll still be advancing the culture, you'll still be helping the culture, and you actually be helping the culture probably a lot more, with all due respect to artists, than the artistic side at this point. One of the things that we were talking about before is, I do believe that results count. Hip hop is where it is today. And the reason why we're talking about it is because it's the #1 sales force in the music industry. If it was not hip hop, we would not be sitting here talking about how influential we could be in the music industry. There'd be none of that. It would be Korean, K-pop, it would be BTS. We'll just be talking about that type of stuff right now. So results really do count, and talent is key. The only way you're going to be talented and you're going to be listened to when you're sitting at a table, if you know what you're talking about. I've been at meetings where you're sitting there with an artist, and as a business manager, and you're trying to understand, you're trying to not educate, but walk through the deal with them, and they're asking for things like that's not important. And that's where we lose a lot of our points, I believe, is educating. We need to have more forces on the behind the scenes where it's not as exciting and as sexy as being on stage, to make sure the money's right, to make sure the lawyers the deals are right, to make sure that end of the day, you perform a show where you make $100,000, you're actually keeping $70,000. You're not walking away with 10. Because you have an entourage of people, because you have a percentage that you're paying all over the place. So I really do believe that if there's one thing that we could be doing is more of this, talking to, going out there and talking to younger people and just telling them that there is other things than beat making. It is sexy to know what the deals actually say, beyond saying that I signed with a major label. It is cool to understand what contract you sign and what you own and what you don't own. It is interesting to understand how, when you release a song, how it's going to impact radio and what you should be aiming for, how the digital markets work, how the DSPs work, how tech works, and how, as a music, especially nowadays, more and more, as an artist, if you're just going to be a musical artist, you ain't going to make money. You have to be in fashion. You have to have an idea on content creation, visual content creation, all the aspects of the business. So it is sexy to have the other side of the business and not just the artistic side and creative side. And I love the creative side. I'm not criticizing. So just education and more of this stuff.
And that's a great piece of advice. But as I said before, there are a large number of the industry people that are not us watching. Is there anything that you would like them to do for us in terms of education, in terms of workshops, in terms of outreach, in terms of any of these kind of things?
Having programs that are not just studio based. Having programs where you go in and go with the marketing team, and having programs where you go in with the publishing team, having programs where you go in and sit with the boring ass accountants and finding out what they're doing, having programs where you go in and read royalty reports. All these software systems that are out there, having programs and understanding what the back end of the music industry is. This is the only industry where people know what song is out there, but nobody understands how much money the song actually makes.
Okay.
Everybody knows that Apple makes money on selling computers, and everybody understands how that works. Nobody understands how the music industry works. And I was the first. I was a business consultant, thought I was fairly smart. The first thing I saw when I started working for an analyzing company, a music company, was I didn't understand how they're still in business. I told them, you're going to go bankrupt in 2 years. Stop doing this. You're wasting your time.
Okay.
So it's that part, opening the doors and showing, like, under the hood, showing people under the hood without showing too many secrets, but showing people and educating people so that young people can see different avenues than just being artists.
Who wants to go next? Who's next? Sorry, it's a hip hop Harry joke.
All right. I'll do it. So, you know, not to repeat what everybody else has said, I'm 100% on what they're saying. The one wrinkle I guess I want to throw into it is, you know, this kind of goes on what Randy was saying before about the xenophobia side of it and the not putting people in a box, because, you know, even here in this call, right, what we're talking about is Black people working in Black music, right? And that's great because that's a necessity. But beyond that, what also kind of limits this whole situation is a preconception that, oh, well, that's all you can work on, or that's what you can be in, and you don't have the capacity to work in different areas, because the reality is in this country, you know, what is it? What's the number? 3.5%, 8%, whatever the 11%, the number of Black people.
3.9 and 8.8.
And the crazy thing is, I heard a stat where 40% or something like that of the Black people in Canada are in Toronto, right? So, you know, if you take away Toronto, Halifax, and Montreal, there's still a lot of population in the country where there's not going to be that much, Black people, that much Black music or whatever, but we're still able to do other things within the industry without being pigeonholed in that box, right? And that's a conversation with the industry at large that I think, you know, is kind of phase 2, right? If phase 1 is, okay, let's at least make sure Black people are working on Black music. Phase 2 is, hey, we can do other stuff too.
Yeah. And it's ironic because somebody just cussed me out for making a hip hop Harry joke. But the fact of the matter is that that is actually a testament to how pervasive our culture is in the world. That as soon as I said it, everybody on the call was like, go. Anyway, my point, there was somebody, I think Randy still has to go, and then I want to ask Jessica a specific question before we cut.
Not to duplicate what everybody else said, I think MIRO hit the nail on the head in terms of that xenophobia. We have to understand that a lot of these conversations are triggering. For us to create sort of vertical integration across all industry in entertainment and media, it's going to require it requires us investing into allyship, right? So that means that we're having reciprocal and mutually beneficial conversations with those people who are the decision makers, making that process of understanding what are the decisions and benchmarks that need to be achieved, making sure that they understand that they can be a part of that solution and that there's some leadership, whether it be through Advance or other industry leaders like ourselves that are on this panel and otherwise, to help them navigate that process so that it's not totally foreign and they don't feel like they're kind of like swimming in in the lake with no paddle type of thing, right? In the water with no paddle. So providing them some guides, us as Black leaders, providing some of those other allies across industries a lifeline so that they can navigate some of these triggering and kind of like off-centered conversations that they might not be fully up to speed on. And I think that would be another solution to address the xenophobia.
Okay, and Jessica, I know that you're not of the entertainment industry, but you know what solutions do you see, and in terms of measurements, etc., in terms of moving this conversation along and creating long-standing, pay equity, etc., throughout the industry?
Well, I commend all of you guys who have been on here for the last 9 weeks, and Click In Yourself as well as CIMA for aggregating the rest of the data in terms of pushing all of this forward. And I think that's the starting point, having data that can be leveraged starting now so we can see what the playing field is, and then use going forward to be able to measure 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now to see how much change has been made. So I think there's a huge piece into, I can't remember what was Oko's point, but about things that aren't sexy. And unfortunately, writing reports collecting data, surveys is definitely not what part of the fun or sexy part. I'm sure you guys can both attest to that. But the other piece is it's valuable, because at the end of the day, when government, when businesses, et cetera, are making their decisions, and it all comes down to dollars and cents, they're looking at data. So understanding how valuable it is to collect and have that data, to be able to leverage that, because at the end of the day, when you're not speaking anecdotally, it's very powerful, even though numbers, to Craig's point about the radio boxes and whatnot, can be manipulated. The point is you'll have something to work with, whereas other people do not. And then on the barrier side, just appreciating from the dominant culture perspective and the people who are the gatekeepers right now, them understanding that they are the barriers. That, again, from what I've seen on this panel and the rest of the panels that have been held for the last 9 weeks, there's no lack of people willing to do the work. And I would say even for those of you who have been in the game for a long time, have been doing it for free and thanklessly. So at this point, at this juncture, getting behind you guys so that you guys can support the people who are coming up, that's one of the solutions. Again, the data piece is so important. And then also understanding the pieces, but I can't even stress enough the importance of technology, especially the way it's transformed your industry, from DJs using Serato to the way music is produced now. We don't have CDs anymore. Like, I look at CDs and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? It hurts to throw them out, but I don't even have a CD player, right? So what are you going to do with it? But understanding that technology is the way to go. And that might, and Randy's going to hate me because I think we still need radio and whatnot, but how do we, because we are the innovators, we create culture, we do all these things, how do we even maybe bypass some of these gatekeepers and leverage technology to do what we need to do? I mean, in terms of music sales, yes, there's the challenges because Apple and Google and Microsoft still own their platforms, but how do we become the ingenuitive solvers that we are and that we've been from the beginning of time to either create a system where they have to work with us, kind of like Napster again did to the music industry, or just innovate and evolve so much that we leave them in the dust and they have no other choice but to work with us. So I think, again, to reiterate the report, huge piece. Working with Advance, I don't know much about Advance, but I'll definitely be circling back with Vivian to understand more from a training and development perspective. But
Miro's your guy. Miro's your guy.
Oh, sorry, Miro. There you go. So we'll be connecting.
I'm passing the buck. Miro, Craig,
the
Aaron,
baton. There
Gary,
you go. Exactly. Well, and even understanding too, like Craig sits on the board for Remix. All of those types of things where there's the opportunity to do that, but to support, I think it's about supporting, it's about data from our side, but then from the dominant culture or from the gatekeepers and the stakeholders, them being open to listening to the people who have been in the fold and been in the cut from day one. So I think another good example is like Randy Lennox. He's a music industry guy. Now he's the head of Bell. You know, what is he doing? It's the same challenge. And you're talking about media and representation. It's the same thing. So how is he pulling or working with people he's worked with when he was in that role in music in the media side? Because it's the same thing. So leveraging those. And then again, from our point, especially now with social media, Randy, don't hate me, but I mean, Auntie Jillian called him out when the whole kerfuffle kicked off with, what's it called, Jessica Mulroney and Sasha Exeter. That's when, you know, Auntie Jillian stepped up and said, hey, you know, how come she has this show? You've taken her off. What about what we're doing? And she was able to leverage her social media and YouTube platform to make it onto mainstream and be one of the shows on CTV. So there's a couple of answers. I know we're running over time, so I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to go to Click in a second, but I want to actually speak to that Auntie Jillian thing, which is that I'm so happy that she has been able to reverage and get that CTV show. But I don't want these companies to think that that the reactionary response to any comment, I know, is to just throw one person in. The conversation isn't about one person; it's about an entire community. Click, what are your thoughts on the biggest barriers as we shut it down?
I'm trying to think. Do I come with the Martin or the Malcolm or the Huey? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, you know, this is the end now. I'm like, okay, do I come with the militant Tupac?
It depends if you need. Depends if you need to get a job during COVID.
I know. Well, listen. Everybody said some amazing things. We've heard some really, really good stuff. If you haven't watched these, go back and watch them on our website. I think that I'm really happy that we've had the panel we had here today. Vivian, Craig, MIRO, with the work you guys are doing with Advance and with the community and starting that, I think is, in my opinion, one of the first things that is really needed to help kind of echo, I guess, what everybody else has been saying here, from infrastructure to chasing data to all these different things. I guess the one thing I would say differently in this space right now is empowering our own, and empowering our own in by all means necessary attitude. Because yes, we can go and say all these things and put a report out there and do all these things, but you know, this has all been done before. What we're doing is just, we're just in a different time and space, and the way that people are taking this in is in a different mindset. So maybe what we're doing, what our ancestors and elders and everybody else had done before us, might connect better this time around. But I do think that we still need to be, hate to say it, a little militant. I'm not talking about going in with guns and shit. I'm talking about demanding what we need and what we want to actually see the change that is needed. And for me, some of that is really about speaking with companies about exactly where they are lacking and us fulfilling that role. So it's not just saying, hey, you have a problem here and you don't have somebody that works here, da, 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 da. It's literally saying, I have somebody for you. We as a community have to empower ourselves and fill the void so that there is no excuses. That's my rant in terms of what I think is needed and how to actually make a solution. You know what I mean? But again, Ian, thank you so much for.
Well, I didn't get to put in my 2 cents. You can't.
No,
have
I'm going to let you go next. I just wanted to say thank you for bonding with me to make this happen. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you know, it's been a really great thing, and this is not just, you know, going to end here. We want to take this a step further. So, you know, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to be Malcolm then. And I'm going to say that I think that one of the greatest barriers to the creation of Black infrastructure in the Black music industry is these terms. We have great partners in CIMA, but I think the term allyship is actually probably one of the most dangerous things that we can see today, because what I'm seeing is that there is a lot of box ticking going on. There is a lot of, you know, I spoke on one episode about a report where there were 35 pictures, 27 of BIPOC, 19 of Black, and 3 of Hawaii Mighty. There's a lot of window dressing going on. There's a lot of diversity and inclusion committees and positions being created. But there's a requirement of these organizations, these individuals who put on, you know, Black Lives Matter shirts and black boxes on their Instagram pages and cry about the plight of Black people, to actually establish relationships with these Black people, to establish community advisory boards that tell them, as opposed to you, like, I think the term is white-splaining, and deciding what it is that we need. And, you know what I mean? And just throwing money that is not for specific things, that will will allow organizations to do something one year, but never again next year. They'll be scrambling to look for funding. If you're really trying to help, right, it's core funding. It's not project-based funding. If you're really trying to help, it is anti-bias race training straight through your infrastructure, from your HR to your executive. And I don't care how many Black people you know, right? If you don't think that you need to watch this because you already know everything about us, then you're the problem. If you don't think that you need to do the work because you've been around Black people or proximity or any of this bullshit that you're talking about, you're the problem. And if this conversation ends right here with a panel discussion, then you're the problem, right? So I guess with that said, BDRB.ca, all the episodes are up there. This will be an ongoing initiative. We will be completing a report over the next couple of months in consultation with the community and our good friends, Vivian, Craig, MIRO, Jamelia, and everyone at Advance. And this has been Breaking Down Racial Barriers. 10 weeks in the books. Report is coming. Look out for it in the new year. And I'm going to throw to our ally. I don't use the word ally. I hate it. But our good friends at CIMA, once again, do not call yourself an ally. It's like calling yourself humble. It just doesn't work. But if you are an ally, you will stand in front and beside us and pull us up without any expectation of something in return. Okay, if you really want to make change. Stuart, thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm really not sure how to follow any of that or do justice to it, Ian. But you know, it really was an incredibly powerful discussion today, and it was a great way to wrap up 10 weeks of what I thought was really honest and direct dialogue. But I do have to say that these past 10 weeks is only prologue. It's only the prologue for me. As you're all saying, as Ian, you just said, the real work, the real test will now begin and play out in the weeks and months and even years to come, really. And, you know, I think we collectively need to take to heart all the words and the feelings and the pain we've heard and turn it all into positive action. And, you know, as I said before, CIMA is committed to making positive change, and our board of directors and all of us on the staff want to see change happen, and we want to be part of that change. And I know you caution us about the word ally, but I hope we can earn the privilege of being called your ally going forward. And, you know, as you say, Ian and Click, the next steps are to craft a report and to create that call to action that we can all sign on to and make sure that change, you know, real change happens and continues to happen. It's not just, you know, in this time frame, as you're saying. And, you know, and I'm hoping that there's real desire and an optimism out throughout the industry for that to happen as well. And, you know, just look at all of the organizations that have supported and promoted these 10 events. And I can tell you that members of the industry from coast to coast to coast have tuned in over the weeks, as have members of the government and the media. I know that the Minister of Canadian Heritage has heard this call to action too. So we're expecting action from him and from his government. So CIMA will continue to lend its voice to this cause, you know, simply because it's long overdue and it's the right thing to do. And really, I think what it comes down to is I'm calling on all of my colleagues in the industry to follow through on this and to follow through on hopefully that sense of optimism and commitment to make things happen and make change happen. And it will only happen if we all get on board and we move these systemic obstacles out of the way. So if I may, I can't thank Ian and Click enough for their tremendous leadership. Everyone on the panel and the prior panels for their leadership. None of this would have happened without your drive and your creativity. But if you would allow me, I do want to point out, you know, the tremendous work that Sam and Matt on my team have put in over these weeks. These guys are the unsung heroes. And, you know, these guys are the ones that are put the machinery in motion and make it all run smoothly. So before Ian, you take us out of here, you know, I would like to ask Matt and Sam to say a few words about what this 10-part series has meant to them, because really they've been a critical component of all this as well. Fellas, can you do
Matt,
that?
Sam, can you guys come back on?
Someone kick it off. Matt, you kick it off.
Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank both Click and Ian and literally every panelist, every sponsor who's been part of this series. As a young working professional myself, I've honestly been awed and inspired by your excellence, just strengthened by seeing your own strength. And I've been heartbroken and frustrated to see the pain and the struggles that you've all dealt with. But I'm honestly refreshed after seeing this 10-week series, after seeing you speak your truths and your experiences. It's inspired me to also contribute to the change that's incoming to this industry and that's imminent, because I know that this is the first step to making this a stronger industry landscape for all of us, for all of our voices, for all of our music, our culture, and for all of our lives. So thank you all so much.
Okay, that's way more sincere and in depth than my my kind of comments. But really, like, my remarks are all about praising Click and Ian. Holy shit! This started as like a potential 2-hour town hall conversation, and it became a 10-part series with over 60 speakers, 20+ hours of content, and I could not even, anyway, it just blows my mind, the amount of energy that you two have put into it. And that has also put so much more energy and excitement to be a part of something like this. Click, thank you for bringing Ian into my life. The amount of calls we've had together, and I feel like we're at least like common law of some sort, maybe married, I don't know. But anyways, both you and Ian, you've always been like extremely positive and always kept going, and have done well over what was ever expected. And anyways, all the credit goes to you two, and I'm extremely proud and privileged to have been a part of this series. And with you two and Matt, I just thank you for letting me be a part of something that's so special.
I don't want to. I appreciate that a lot, and I guess this is the humbleness in me, but like, I do have to say, and I know there's a video that both me and Ian just shared on our socials and stuff, but you know, there's 60 people here, 60 Black professionals in the music business from all the way from Canada to the East. I mean, from the West Coast to the East Coast, and really the credit goes to everybody. You know what I'm saying? Because this would not exist without that. You know what I mean? So. Anyway, that's enough. Let's sign off.
Well, I actually just want to actually just take a moment to thank everyone as well, CIMA, Sam and Matt, for your countless hours. I hope that you weren't. I hope you guys are probably ready to get rid of me, and I'm sorry for my unrelenting desire to push the boundaries. This was actually supposed to be a lunch and learn, right? I said no way. Just like I said no to the Toronto Star. Like, I can't write an op-ed on racism in 500 words. I'd have to write racism 500 times. I just kept pushing and pushing. Website, this, that. So look out for the playlist coming soon, the Spotify, Apple podcast coming soon with all these episodes edited. Log on to www.bdrb.ca. And thank you to Stuart, to Matt, and to CIMA, to Factor, to Ontario Creates, and the Government of Canada, as well as our over 30 partners throughout the series. We look forward to working with you guys all in greater capacity over the coming months and years, and to introducing you to Advance as well.
And Dalton Higgins, and Dalton for helping.
Dalton Higgins as
Dalton.
well, the publicist. I'd be remiss if we forgot that we had a Black publicist on the project as well. Okay, and that has been 10 weeks of breaking down racial barriers. Thank you all so much. Thank you to my family for putting up with me, and thank you to my other family, Sam and Matt, my new little brother. And we're out.
Later.
Take us out. Peace.